Top Game with your host, Sammy Castro. Episode 30, Master Sergeant Nate Bailey. Nate and I first met virtually through Reddit and later in person at Fort Meade, Maryland. And since then, he's been a persistent source of constructive criticism behind this podcast. Honestly, the most prevalent of which has been, when are you dropping new episodes? Well, here we are. Weighing in at over 3 hours, I contemplated cutting this down to about an hour and then changed my mind. This isn't War on the Rocks. I'm not Jocko, Joe Rogan, or Tim Ferriss. This is Top Game, and over time, I've centered on these 10 words. Intimate conversations with Marines, exploring their journeys, perspectives, and experiences, and I think this episode is true to that. In this conversation, Nate and I discussed the requirement for courage to try new things, the value of being a perpetual novice in constant pursuit of incremental improvement, as well as the link between humility and empathy for others, and how cohesion may be cultivated through sharing our time and stories with one another. Thanks for tuning in. Nate Bailey. How did we first meet? Do you remember?
I think the first time we actually met, you had come to Fort Meade. We met face to face. You were in the theater. You came to, forget what it was, but we came. I had reached out to you on Reddit originally.
Yeah.
And I messaged you after I started listening to the podcast.
What do you remember the tone of that exchange? What it was about? What it entailed?
I think it was just thanks. Thanks for everything. 'Cause you had a lot of guys that I'd looked up to growing up. So Sam Carter, I think because it was during when I was here at Quantico for advanced school, and I had duty overnight at the barracks, and I listened to Sam's entire episode that night. And I think the next morning I shot you a message on Reddit.
How well did you know Sam?
He and I have crossed paths over the years. I think the first time I crossed paths with him was 2006 when we were both in Iraq at the same time. He was with Intel Battalion. I was with Radio Battalion. They were co-located with the OCAC there in Fallujah. I was at the OCE, which happened to be on Camp Fallujah as well, probably about a 5-minute walk away.
What year was this?
2006.
And you which battalion?
First Radio. It was First Radio California, their first deployment as a battalion. So it was right after the transition.
The boot battalion. That's funny. Yeah, that was interesting for us out at Second. It's like, wait a minute, they're changing numbers and like changing governments, or like it was strange. But it ended up, we kind of filled the gap as, one stood up and the other kind of conducted their cellular division. And we, it was like 2004 time frame, I guess, 4 or 5 time frame. As we had swapped out with then First Radio Battalion. I remember a few of the guys that were on the team that we took over for in Habanilla, but not much. I don't remember much about them.
What was crazy was I checked into the battalion in 2005, coming from Okinawa. So the battalion had officially stood up maybe a month or two, I think, before I got there. So all the gear we had was all the stuff that then Third Radio didn't want. So
isn't it interesting how that works? Yeah. We're still fighting over gear right now.
It was pretty interesting because I was, being a 51, I worked down in our comm ops section. And I think we had 10 119s and a couple OE 254s that had to go inventory those radios every day, even though they were locked up. Nobody signed them out. every day had to go out there and inventory them. Complete SL3.
Was there a perception that it wasn't just the gear that they didn't want, it was also the people that they didn't want?
Not that I saw, but like on the 51 side, we got Justin Noe came over, so he and that's how I met him.
I didn't know he was a 51.
He was a 51. We were at first together.
He's in Colorado right now, right?
He's in Florida. Well, he just retired.
I didn't know that.
So he was in Colorado. He's down in Florida right now.
Who's in Colorado now?
I think it's gapped at the moment, but
interesting.
I think Marcus Mettert from 1MSG might be heading out there.
Okay. Yeah, I got to be honest. I've not stayed up with the 2602 community over the years. I had the guys that raised me, Radbin, the Fourniers and the Farquhars and the Watkins and a few others. But I left the fleet in 2008. Didn't come back to 2016. And, they were guys that, were behind me in some instances. But, I had the opportunity to link up with Keeker and Mush as the fives at the time at some TNR manual conference or working groups, whatever, in San Angelo. I did not like Keeker at all at first engagement. We exchanged some words. He got a little frustrated over how much it cost to fly me out from Okinawa to San Angelo. How else are you going to get our input, right? And one thing I learned out there was that if you're not at the table, your ass is on the menu. If I'm the SIGINT EW chief of 3MEF, then I'm the SIGINT EW chief of 3MEF.
You need to be there.
Yeah.
It's funny because last week being at Fort Meade, I called Rendina. I was like, hey, we have to come out here once every other quarter because doing a VTC to talk to everybody, that's not where we're gonna make our money. Like there's so much that we're gonna miss on VTC. So I feel bad for everybody that's having to dial in this week.
Yeah.
Because you miss the sidebar, everything.
Yeah. It's one of those blurbs you have to put in DTS, like this cannot be conducted. And I think you can see lawyer that way, see lawyer, argue that any way you want. But the reality of the matter is that there's something tangible, when you're face to face. It's one of the reasons why I don't do remote interviews for Top Game. But, like back to the SeaWorlds, like for me, Keeker and Mush were the fives that kind of brought me back into the fold, in terms of that relationship between staff and CO and Chief Warrant Officer. And part of it was not so much Keeker, because it's just Keeker, who I love now, but at the moment I didn't connect with them until maybe almost a year and a half later after seeing him at multiple engagements. He was an acquired taste, kind of like a good scotch, right? But Mush, there was just something about him. He could be physically imposing, like the mountain that rides or that SIGINT, but he had a calm presence about him. And some of the conversations that we got into at the, fire pits or, smoke, at the smoke circle, or that we were hanging out there, guys like me, Scoggins, Simmons, and others, those interactions re-greened me in a way that I didn't know at the time how much I needed after being gone from the fleet for that extended period of time.
Yeah.
That's 8 fucking years, and that's a huge hurdle to overcome. Honestly, one of the reasons why I started doing Top Game was to kind of gain some insight into, what made a good Master Sergeant, because I didn't want to be a shitty one, right? You never want to be that guy. Having guys like Mush and Keeker, formative experiences for me, even as a senior staff NCO. I have to be honest, this conference, this working group for the 2600s that's underway right now, I see a huge level of participation from our 2602s. I like what I'm seeing.
I don't think I've seen this many
Yeah.
in a long time.
Yeah.
I don't think ever.
Yeah. Not as many master guns, I noticed, but I think some of it is, we got a couple that are selected, just haven't been pinned on.
Mm-hmm.
Guys that are inbound. Cornette, couldn't make it, but he'll be out here before too long. I'm looking forward to working with him. I said today when he was on the face phone, like, man, Nuts is so much smarter than he looks.
I worked with him. I worked with him at MSgt, and then one of the reasons I went out to the schoolhouse, the MSgt schoolhouse, was he was going to be the senior SIGINT instructor. I was like, I like him. I'll work. I'm not ready to leave this community yet. And I think that's just where the two of us just really work together.
Yeah. We didn't know each other. We didn't meet until I was out in Okie, and I don't know, I think it was at a TNR manual conference that we linked up, and like our first real conversation was when I interviewed him. And that was awesome, like to get to know him in that capacity. And his willingness to do it, that meant a lot too, because there is a certain amount of intimacy and vulnerability.
Mm-hmm.
You open yourself up to the scrutiny of others, especially, we're like 30 episodes in and Más o Menos, and unlike Sonny, who was the first guy, you know what you're walking into to a certain extent. And, I mentioned to you before we started rolling, one of the things about the show that I've become aware of is that there's this perception, there's a kingmaker aspect to it. I don't agree with that, and I've tried to suppress that as much as possible, right? Information maneuver, influence, operations, all of that. But I think a lot of it is just, like I said, the strength of the pack is a wolf. The strength of the wolf is a pack, and another way of saying it is, you tell me who you walk with, and I tell you who you are. Even though like you and I don't know each other, I think to a certain extent there's an aspect where, having put so much content out there, people know me more than I know them, because
I get that. That makes sense.
And I've heard several of my Marines that I had Staff Sergeant Moore, when he checked in, he's like I know you are, Master Guns. I listen to your podcast, and I was like, oh, I don't know how to feel about that.
It was bound to happen.
Yeah, that's true. And if I wasn't prepared for that, why did I press record in the first place? But I think one of the things though that I've been getting from the community, the ARC field, not just the 2600s, but 1700s and some O2s and others, is like, when are we going to get more shows? Like, come on, like what are you waiting for? And part of it was, Okinawa's different than Washington, D.C. Being a Master Sergeant in Camp Courtney is different than being a Master Guns in Washington, D.C. And there was still a learning process in terms of figuring out where I was actually going to be seated when it was all said and done, because there was a lot of churn. And even though I've been here almost 2 years now, about 2 years, there's so much movement at Headquarters Marine Corps. It's taken me up to this, duration of time to gain my bearings through the midst of COVID and force design. And
there's a lot going on. And the battalions and the MEF, I'm sure it's busy, or it seems busy in its own way, but that's not up here where these big decisions of, all right, well, it's Tuesday, we're done with tanks. All right, what's next?
Yeah.
What do we do with these guys?
Yeah, and one of the things that's been interesting is, like, some of these, our forebears are sneak dissing or openly dissing, what it is that we're doing, without, I would argue, sufficient information or context. A retiree on Reddit or anywhere else in social media who doesn't know what red versus blue looks like, with all of the analysis and know No one's got a Palantir or a crystal ball, but I think they're making emotional snap judgments based upon perception that we're losing our way. And I don't know if I agree with that. I mean, reading between the lines from the Commandant's Planning Guidance and all of the messaging that he's pushed out, since then, I bought in.
I think so. If you look at the past 20 years, the Great Desert Wars, we changed. I came in 2003, so that's all I've ever known. But talk to guys that came in, did it before that. We're almost going. We're in a way going back to that, but we realize we have to adapt to what we're doing.
Cross. Yeah, I was pulling some artifacts out of old journals of mine, notebooks. I was reminded by the fact that it was Mattis that signed the documentation establishing information as the new warfighting function. And I had to stop on that fact alone and reflect on that. Because I think a lot of times, particularly in the 2600 OC field, and I've seen this time and again, and it's come up, and guys who I love, trust, and respect, admire, and even look up to, how have we subjugated one warfighting function to another? And I said the same thing myself once to Dudo, of all people. And I said it to him as I was the SIG and EW chief at 3MEF, and he was the operations chief of 3MIG. But I think more it was an interrogative. It was a question. I'll go back and play the tape and splice it in here to fucking keep myself accountable, right? Because maybe I'm just looking back at it and giving myself more credit than I probably deserve. But does the advent of information as a warfighting function supersede intelligence as a warfighting function, with the understanding that structurally within Headquarters Marine Corps' table of organization, the Deputy Commandant of Information has the Director of Intelligence as a subordinate?
I know what you're talking about, though. It has been conversations. I even made a meme about Sean Nicol.
In what regard? What?
You know that scene from, what was it, The Dark Knight, when he goes, I believe in Harvey Dent. It was Sean Nicol, I believe in the MiG.
Yeah, Sean's drinking the Kool-Aid now. Sean's making the Kool-Aid. How was that? How was that survived contact with the tribe at Radbin?
So there's a lot of changes since he came in. Colonel Root came in. I think it's for the better, in a regard, like we're growing it, right? It had a foundation, and we're now pushing it forward. We're trying to integrate what the MiG has with everybody underneath it. For instance, I last week I brought a IO Marine up to Fort Meade.
Okay.
To integrate there.
When you say IO, what?
Like a PSYOP.
Okay.
Marine.
Okay. And how did that Marine respond to that environment?
I turned him over, and we'll see. He's still got he's up here for 3 weeks.
Okay.
He's a gunny. I ran into him a couple times last week. I was like, how's it going? I was like, we're figuring out where we can use the authorities from up here to do what we want to do, and where we can get ideas to do what we as one MiG and one MEF want to influence the information environment. So I want to talk to him on the back end and see what he learned integrating, what we do, and then also on the cyber side. Yeah, and I've kind of couched it to our team in the Information Maneuver Division under DCI as, we've got a bunch of specialists in their particular area. In a lot of ways, it reminds me of the first few UFCs where, you had a guy that was a boxer, a guy that was
a Kimpo fighter, a guy that was, Muay Thai, and then you had like, a jiu-jitsu guy, but you fast forward, eventually we started to connect the dots and tie things together to create what is, referred to now as a mixed martial artist.
Because some of those early ones, like Gracie's, would get in there and dominate.
Well, until they came across people who could defend takedowns, create and maintain distance, right? Almost like a mature precision strike regime, and outstick the opponent. And then when they did get tied up, the wrestling was sufficient to be able to
break away.
Exactly, and then again create that distance. And we saw the to a certain extent, it was the advent of the leg kick, right? Destroying their mobility, their agility, and forcing them into the horns of a dilemma of like, do I shoot? Do I, stand back and do I not engage? Like all of those aspects started to present themselves. And I think that's not a perfect analogy, but an apt one for the purposes of discussion and discovery of where we need to go with, in terms of tying all of these information related capabilities towards, our end state or our desired objectives.
Well, I think you can look at it almost like, so, we always say like intel drives ops. Well, sometimes ops drives intel, but you could do the same on information and intelligence. They can feed each other.
Yes, they can.
And that's where I think where we're trying to get to out at first. I know everybody's trying to in their own regard, but that's why I made the meme of sent it to Nikau.
Has he seen it?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, you gotta shoot it to me.
I'll have to dig it up. And
so we don't know each other very well. I know you're married. I know you got kids, right?
One kid.
Okay.
And a daughter.
How old is she?
7.
Wow. I think I was blessed that I had boys. I am a firm believer that if I had a daughter, she'd have me wrapped around her fingers, and yeah, it's better that I had boys.
She when I have her, oh, absolutely.
Yeah. So you and mom are no longer together.
No. So she's out in San Diego. So going to First Radio this tour has been awesome in that regard. Getting time with her. So her living down in San Diego, she doesn't do a lot of outdoor stuff. So Dad takes her hiking. We went up on a mountain a few weeks ago to look for camping sites, and she got to play in the snow. It's like she woke up in the morning, in a almost desert environment, and then in the afternoon, she's in the snow. To the point where the other kids wouldn't get out of the vehicle right away. We would stop. All the adults get out, look around. Hey, is this going to be a good camping spot? She would be unbuckling before I'd even be unbuckled, and like halfway out the door. Yeah. Just loves being outside.
What else is she into?
Crafting.
Like what?
So we bought her a easel, paints, even like the tarp that goes on the ground. So she'll go up to her room and just make things. She's done a couple puppet shows just on her own. She'll take the paper off the easel and write out a script. Yeah. And like a few pages worth, and then she'll make puppets and come down and do those.
You ever record them?
I think one of them I did. We also got her the Lego Mario kits. Okay. She's working on Bowser's Castle right now.
Have you ever seen the augmented reality Mario Kart setup?
I haven't.
So I could be getting this wrong, but I think it's, so they have actual cars, but you control them with the Switch, and they go around the track. And so there are certain objects that are virtually there. Mm-hmm. You have to maneuver around, and it will impact the speed of the turning radius of the car, depending on what transpires in the gameplay, and so on and so forth.
She's got a Switch at home, but then when she comes over to Dad's house, she's like, "Let's play Mario Kart. Turn on the Switch. Let's play Mario Kart." Or she loves Pokemon.
Yeah, Pokemon Go or
Pokemon Go and Pokemon.
We did the Pokemon Go thing for a little bit, just as a goof when it was in its heyday. I guess Niantic is still crushing it. People are still playing it.
She was doing this acting class down in Balboa Park for probably about, I think, 7 weeks or so. So I'd have to drive down there to pick her up. And one time I picked her up and it was like, "Hey, there's a Pokemon event." And her mom said she looked this thing up. She found this Pokemon Go event that's happening right here. And there was a booth and everything set up. And she was like the youngest one there. Everybody else was all adults.
That's interesting, right? How it captures a certain audience that may not have necessarily been, the intended audience.
Mm-hmm.
Has she gotten into the Fortnite thing?
No, not yet. But she wants to have her own YouTube channel.
Yeah, have you seen my youngest has played with content creation a little bit to include, streaming some of his gameplay, which has been eventually resulted in him actually becoming somewhat proficient with Adobe After Effects. And
Really?
And because, we've, with the podcast and doing T-shirt design for, units in the past or, other stuff, we have the Adobe Creative Suite subscription.
Does he do it on Twitch or?
So he'll record straight to his hard drive using NVIDIA's built-in setup with the GPU that he has. Later he'll edit it, splice it together. He's even taken commissions from other players and then made highlight
Really?
films or reels for them and put it to music, and he'll tie like key moments in the gameplay to the beat of the instrumental, and then he'll stop like mid video and then like switch up the music to some like kind of off balancing melody, and then inject like a little meme in the middle of it, and then go right back to the gameplay, or the beat drops and like a drop, like a dubstep drop or something like that, and like creative expression through, I guess, filmmaking. And I think that's the interesting thing with, when you encourage creativity, when you provide them with the tools, and just kind of like go on, get after it, do your thing. Here's your materials, and what they come up with will always surprise you.
So Christmas she got a pottery wheel. Her and her cousin both got a pottery wheel that it came with like 3 pounds of clay you can put on it, and it's got a foot switch and it'll spin it. And so a few weeks ago she's like, "Let's do this." I'm like, all right. Cleared off the dining room table, laid everything out, and it's like, all right, let's figure this out together. Okay, I think this is how you do it. She's like, "You never done this?" I'm like, I've never made it.
That's funny.
Never. But once she got a handle of it, I was like, "Here's all the tools to help shape it." She's like, "Go away. I got this."
But y'all didn't like fire it in the kiln or anything like that?
No, you just let it sit out and it dries. We've done that. She has a bath bomb kit.
Okay.
We made bath bombs a few times.
What'd you put in the bath bomb?
Whatever. Like it's a full on kit. And you can dye it different colors, and it's got different scents, and everything. So we've tried to.
So you're a bath bomb guy?
No, it's hers.
But you don't use them?
No.
You never done a bath bomb?
Oh, I have. A couple times.
Did you try to man it up with like tobacco and cedar wood or?
No, it was. I forget what it was. I've tried it a couple times.
Yeah, Liz buys them all the time. I'll use them. The boys use them.
Especially if my back's really bothering me.
Yeah.
I've definitely done that. But that's her thing. Like, she'll make them, and she has some bath bombs that I bought that have like toys inside of them, like little dinosaurs. And so I think what we're going to do is start taking those and putting it in the ones that she's going to make.
Okay.
So now she gets it all over again. It's a new surprise.
Here in Lorton, I don't know if you know, but there used to be a prison here.
Really?
Yeah. And so the work center is what they call it, was repurposed, and now it's kind of like a arts and crafts kind of facility. In the weekends and stuff, they'll have like, a little fair and go in. People, will rent out space for a booth and sell their products. And there's one little girl, she makes her own soap, much like Willie's daughter was doing for a time.
Yeah.
And so, I'm walking by, I'm looking, I'm like, you got anything that I could use like for shaving, with a bristle brush? And she's like, I don't know. And then she looks at her dad like, do I have anything for shaving? He's like, yeah, you got that one, And she's like, oh, okay. She goes in her bag and she pulls out her like little special stash. And it had, I don't remember what the exact scent was, but something a little bit more masculine. And I was like, how much is it? And she like looks at her dad and is like, don't look at me. Like, you're the one that made it. How much you selling it for? She's like, $2. And I said, sold. And I gave her 10. She was like, oh, you want? I said, no, keep it. Do your thing. Just want to encourage a young lady getting her business up off the ground. Anything that we can do to provide that type of creative output for our youngsters. You definitely want to do that. There's a former Marine I served with at Second. She's now working as a social worker here on the East Coast, a little further north from us. And she asked me if I'd be interested in doing motivational speaking bit for some kids that were going through a rough patch. And I was like, okay. And she's like, you have to understand that, they're like 10 or 12 or whatever, but because of the trauma that they'd gone through, they're not at their age level. So, you're going to have to like tone down your vocabulary and your delivery, not go over their heads. And immediately, as soon as I started talking to them, I was shooting way over the target. She paused me, brought me back down to, the appropriate level. But fortunately, I had a backup plan. And there's this great book that we bought the boys. They're 15 and 20. We still buy them kids' books. And this one is about trying.
What's it called?
Trying.
That's just the name of the book, Trying?
Yeah, Trying. And essentially, I won't spoil the ending, but this young man is looking to improve his skills in sculpture, but along the way gets discouraged. And so his mentor essentially like walks him through like what it takes, to get good at something. I think the last part, how I ended it after I finished the book, went over their head, but I needed to say it for me, which was the relentless pursuit of incremental improvement towards unattainable perfection in everything you do. Mm-hmm. A master guns, a better Marine than me once said, suck less, right? Like just get a little bit better every day, particularly if it's your profession. And as I was listening today to some of the conversations about guys that leave and come back to the Ock field and or get assigned to an SDA, or they're not in the Fleet Marine Force, they're in the support establishment, and they come back and they're completely
and how do
lost.
we spin them back up?
How do we spin them back up?
What we're doing?
Right. And it reminded me of, I think that's just the nature of the game. Like you're never going to have a perfect environment to cultivate your trade craft. You're going to have to, create those opportunities for yourself sometimes, study on your own, or humble yourself to learn from the individual that has that established level of proficiency that you're looking to attain in order to be able to get to where you need to be, even if you're senior to that individual. I just don't know if it's overblown in terms of it's not as bad of a deal as some were making it out to be, or if it's exactly that way, because the last time I was at a radio battalion was in 2008. But from your experience and your observations, is that kind of where we are?
It depends, I think, on the individual Marine. Do they have the drive and care to pick up where they left off and get back up to speed. This is my first time back to the fleet since. So I got out in 2008.
Out.
Out.
Like, I'm done.
I EAS'd after my first enlistment.
Were you
So
bitter?
So I came in, went to Oki, got really lucky, did an IA deployment out of Oki, went to Afghanistan in 2004. Just me.
Who goes to Oki to go to Afghanistan? Nate Bailey.
The crazy part was we were working up to go to Cobra Gold.
Nice.
And I got to miss Cobra Gold.
Didn't get to drink the Cobra blood.
Didn't go to Thailand. Went to Afghanistan instead.
Yeah.
But did that. Came back to the island. Went to first. Deployed. Did that. Did a MEU. And going from OEF, OIF, then a MEU, where the MEU's a lot slower. I was like, this just isn't. It's not for me. I was on terminal leave. Dan Adams.
Which MEU is this?
The 11th MEU.
Okay.
We did took off, skipped Hawaii. So we didn't port in Hawaii. Went straight to Bangladesh and did a humanitarian assistance.
Which one was that?
2007, 2008.
Sea Angel.
I think so.
Yeah, I was there for the same thing. 22nd MEU.
Did that. Then we went to Singapore for a week. The MEU XO said, we're going to do training. We can't have a week of liberty. Training got canceled the second day. So we had a week of liberty in Singapore, which I was telling Vicente yesterday. I was like, we went to Singapore. We found Little India in Singapore, and we found the only hostel in the area. Walked in, and it was filled with expats, and there was a rock band, some Singaporean rock band going, and we just had a good time that night.
That's awesome.
We left there, went to Dubai. We ended up going to Kuwait for about 20 some odd days. Backloaded back onto the boats to go do pirate hunting off the coast of Africa.
I did some of that too.
Where we didn't get close enough to do anything. I was like, well, I'm done. So came back early, got everything set up for when the main body came back. Then I got out for about 45 days, give or take. While I was on terminal leave, Dan Adams called me. He said, "You want to go to Afghanistan?" I was like, "Absolutely." How do we do this? And it just never happened. So EAS came around, got out, got a couple job offers. Wanted to go be a Trojan FSR in Iraq for a year. I was like, I don't want to do that. Viasat offered me a job working third shift on their watch floor. Decided that wasn't for me. I came back in, and I got really, really lucky and worked at a recruiting station for a little bit, waiting on Joe Black to cut me orders to MARSOC.
Okay.
And all the recruiters were like, "You're not going to MARSOC. You're not going to MARSOC." I was like, I'm going to MARSOC. And got orders and checked in there.
So you didn't actually do recruiting duty. You were just there kind of filling in, marking time.
Correct. They have you're called a PSEP.
Yeah.
So came back in, kept my rank, got my bonus as if I would have re-enlisted.
Nice. Got hooked up.
So I just had a little bit of a break. So just kind of shifted my entry date to the right a little bit.
Leave without pay.
Mm-hmm.
So we had a 51 we just put in for that. Almost similar circumstances. He's actually working for Amazon. But it's funny because he was probably one of the most grumpy fucking corporals I've ever run across in my entire life. I used to make, as a master sergeant, I was rolling with the 51s in the G2 in the mornings, using them as grappling dummies out of love, right? Not that they were dumb. They're some of the smartest Marines that I've ever had the opportunity to work with, but couldn't ground fight for shit. So, wanted to make them better. My point being, like, I'm a brown belt in MSgt, which means nothing, but I'm a blue belt in jiu-jitsu, and I can make it as to where the next time you have to do MSgt, you won't dread it because you'll be somewhat more proficient at it than others. He got out, but stayed in comms with me. And I think eventually between me and Derry and I want to say it was Britain, we were able to get him back in. But he was working for Amazon, but just didn't fucking like it at all. You know, as you come back in, you're only gone for 45 days, but, you know, now you're in,
Mm-hmm.
right? And did something click there?
When I came back in,
Yeah.
it took a minute, but yeah. You know, I checked into first MSOB, you know, before it was Raider Battalion.
Right, because you just go back to Radband, you went to MARSOC, and there's a different expectation there.
It completely different mindset. I got really lucky to work with, you know, one of my best friends, Matt Spare. He was there, and
I don't know him.
he recently retired. But we had worked together at Radio Battalion, and he was my team leader for 2 of my 3 deployments there. I got to meet, you know, all the guys I worked with. You know, John Smith, really good friend. My wife and his wife are really close. White guy named John Smith from Virginia or Vermont, most
Enlisted?
enlisted.
Mhm.
But the connections I made during that time, like I still talk to all those guys. But it was very different than the fleet.
Right, that's what I'm saying, because you're not just a 51 any longer, right?
You're 26XX.
Exactly.
My first deployment there, I was the analyst for the company. No formal analytical training. It was like, if we get any reports, I'm like, I don't know what you're talking about. And look at my deleted folder. I'm like, and what are these emails I get every? Oh, that's all of our reporting I've been deleting.
Ouch. But so how do you overcome that learning curve? Recalibrate, you know, your mindset so that, you know, you're in not only receive mode, but you're actively engaged and you know, incorporating new skill sets, new capabilities, tools.
I think I just threw myself into it with everything, knowing that it was a we couldn't fail, and it just became the way of doing business.
And I had a conversation with General Glavy about the team aspect of the 2600 community. And, you know, we're not the only OC field that deploys as a pack, right? But, you know, we start off like that at a fundamental level, you know, at the radio battalions. And there's something inherently formative about detaching as a small group, and you either congeal or you don't, right? And that cohesion matters. You know, some of it is the time and tested method of shared suffering. Some of it is familiarity breeds contempt. Some of it is knowing each other so well that you just become a spades pair no one can contend with, right? Because you can just read each other's minds and so forth. But it sticks with us over time in a way that I've come to develop a greater appreciation for. I think my officers are surprised when, you know, I can explain that, oh, yeah, I just got that from 3rd Rad, or I just got that from 2nd Rad today, or this just came in from 1st Rad, or 1st MiG, 1 MiG, or you know, so on and so forth. Like that connective tissue is there, and it's live, you know, constantly feeding through, you know, whatever app we're using. It's not WhatsApp. It's there, and that exchange is taking place, that dialogue, that conversation, almost as if we're, you know, all hanging around a digital bonfire and just, you know, shooting messages out to each other. Hey, have you seen this? Did you read this? And that interaction, that engagement, I don't know if that exists in sufficient quantities outside of us. And I asked a question recently of some of my mentors as I'm walking into this new billet into this new role, how do I expand that to some of the other OC fields that are probably in need of it?
I think it's hard.
It's
not. So I don't think it's prevalent within, I'll say, our 1700s.
Because they're still nascent, I would argue. And there's still a dichotomy between OCO and DECO.
Absolutely. And I'll say I don't think there is, just because I spent a year and a half at Mar4 Cyber. And when the MOS came online. So some of the guys that were 26s, they probably still all talk to each other, but there is still definitely that split. Just now they're starting to get the former, 06s are now coming to the Yoko side. And some of them I think are doing really well from talking to some of the guys up there, that I met with last week. So it's starting to happen in some levels, but I think they're radically different missions in a way. The way they're bend.
The work roles, the environment, the experiences are not the same.
Mm-hmm.
In terms of, if we rewind back to 2000, maybe 6-7 time frame, I was an instructor evaluator at SOTG. That 6 Marine team on that MU detachment that chops over to me for mentoring, guidance, instruction, evaluation, all that. I'm putting them through the shit, right? Displacement drills, walk up, fucking serialize their all of their equipment.
They're doing hard stuff together.
Right. Yep. I kill the TL, ATO, make them sit over the side and watch the other 4 try to figure it out. Making sure that they're, collected on the move. Like all of those TTPs, kill sheets, EDLs, where you at? I want to see your team leader's log. Those things.
It doesn't exist there.
It's not on the other side. In a moment of candor, I caught from the previous DCI a data point that was interesting to me, in that one of the things that she was looking to replicate with the 1700s was that exact type of, I don't know if it's organizational culture or that type of tight-knit community.
I think it's also an identity. I think they're still struggling to, because it's so new. What are they? And with, their OC field just changed from cyber to the information maneuver now.
Yep.
I think that, I don't know how, I don't, as an OC field, I don't know how they're going to take that, right? Because you had, when it was cyber, they had multiple different MOSs, and now you just merged them all together.
To become the mixed martial artist.
Correct.
Right. With arguably not having established yourself as being a master of one.
I'll use so we have a staff sergeant at First Rad. He's our watch chief. He's gonna PCA over to 9th Com. He's never done DCO in his life. He just happened to be, he's a 17 because he was a 2611. He's never touched cyber his entire career, and now his last year in the Marine Corps, he's got to go learn DCO.
Interesting. And that determination was made by the monitor?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how I feel about that. But yeah, so the information maneuver piece in that MAR admin drop, and a lot of it was, they fixated on 4 letters, EMSO. Right? Taking a step back, we probably could have worded it a little bit better, because the perception was that all things electromagnetic spectrum were going that way, when in reality it was just the EMSO planners, right? 05, 88. I'll check that to make sure I got it right. I think I did. I'm trying to get my IM information maneuver game tight. But
well, we got their the Dawn tracker on their the TNR before that MAR admin dropped. And we were looking through it. We're like, what is some of this?
Yeah.
Like who wrote some of these events?
Yeah. So it was us in IMD. But it went out for staffing. So, and it came back through and all of that. But when it hit the streets, that's when now it matters, right? Because for whatever reason, I think we don't put the level of effort into some of those staffing events, and I'm guilty of it myself to a great extent, that we probably should. There was an instance where a former 2600, who shall remain nameless unless he comes onto this show and we have it out face to face in person, and for the record, he was invited to our conference. I don't know if he's dialed in, or I haven't heard him up on comms, but the major, essentially managing the ARC field, CC'd me on her response to his questions, or let's just say pointed comments. She's like, Master Guns Castro on the CC line was part of this process. Believe me, he's not selling the ARC field, or giving it away. 2600s are still doing their thing. But, we were talking about that in the shop, me as a 2691 and a bunch of the 17s that work there in our ARC field branch, and ribbing each other, going back and forth. And I was like, nah, I took care of it. If he really cares, he'll be at the requirements working group. If not, then it's just water on the bridge. We'll keep pressing. In that conversation, like, certain things were brought out where there's still, I think, a perception that they're trying to establish themselves, they're trying to prove themselves, and they just haven't arrived there yet. And force design is one of those things that, I think it's fair to ask, did we get it right with establishing that occupational field, now knowing where we're headed and what it took to establish that lane in the road, based upon the requirement to address information as a warfighting function, as I stated, which was signed by Mattis. He didn't do that lightly, and I genuinely believe it's a requirement. But I think part of the problem up to now has been a lack of clear messaging in terms of what does it mean.
I can see that.
And without those cardinal points laid out on the roadmap, it can get confusing. Information and intelligence are the same thing, right? It's just, well, no, it isn't. I don't think we've defined it sufficiently up to now. And I don't know if you've read it, but MSgt 8 is about to drop.
I haven't read that.
Yep. Information as a warfighting function. General Glavy wrote a couple of pieces for this month's Gazette. So it's out there in terms of his executive summary, his candid offering, why this matters. So I don't misquote my new boss as I'm just getting into the job. The one thing that he says at the end of his intro that I wanted to get accurately was, I want to thank the Marine Corps Gazette for giving a voice in critical dialogues for our Marines in and out of uniform on the important issues we face. Change is hard. No one knows that better than a CH-46 pilot recreating himself in the information environment. Change is hard. And how we got to a point, and I asked him this, how it feels to be a helicopter pilot, now the 3-star lieutenant general in charge of information as a warfighting function, and all that entails. He's like, yeah, it's a wild ride.
I can't even imagine that.
I think it's going to require an all of us, all in kind of thing in order to get moving in the right direction. I think one of the things that we've struggled with over the years is with the establishment of the MiGs and so on and so forth, like, what do they do? Mm-hmm. Right? And
how is it not just the MSgt
plus
all over again,
right?
With some additional people.
Yeah.
Like, it is, who do I answer? Do I answer to the MiG or do I answer to the MEF? Who does the battalions? Where does that go?
But I think current events kind of show us just beyond the horizon, pun intended, of some of the applicability to the doctrine, and the underlying justification for its establishment, in terms of something as simple as the Ukrainians opening up a hotline for Russian mothers to call to determine the status of their sons
that's information.
There's so many layers there.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you can blow that wide open. Because imagine if my mother had to call another country to find out, if I was killed or captured, in terms of my whereabouts, my status. You can't suppress that information. Once Mama Castro is worried about, she's talking about it with her sisters and her aunts and the neighbor.
That ship sailed.
Right? And so it just spreads and it ripples, 360 degrees. If you're, the Tsar of Russia trying to control the narrative, that's going to be difficult to do under those circumstances.
That'll get out of control real quick.
Yeah. And there's only so much control you can press upon the information environment, and understanding that complexity and its pervasiveness, I think is a critical component to leveraging it. And we're not, I don't know if we're there yet sufficiently.
Well, it's hard to suppress everything with all the manners of which information can get out these days. I mean, for example, Reddit, Twitter, Telegram, Signal, you have a multitude of ways to communicate these days that just weren't around before.
Is Reddit your social media platform of choice?
It is.
Why?
Because I can get a stream of everything I'm interested in for me. Or
you can curate your front page.
Exactly. That's the word I was looking. I can curate what I'm after, or I can go straight to the news tab and get a variety of sources. Right. I don't.
You open up your aperture.
Absolutely.
Apply your filters. Retract them. Yeah.
I don't like to. So I'm an iPhone person.
Boo. I'm just kidding. I'm an Apple guy too.
And you can really neck down your news filters on there, so you're only getting your view on it. What I like about looking at my news on Reddit is I get things from all over the place, including publications I've never even heard of. Sometimes I'm like, what is this? Is this even a reputable site? I'm like, oh well, let's take a look, and then let's look at the comments.
So a certain amount of social media literacy needs to be applied in any venue. But how quickly do you recognize when you've gone down those dank, dark alleys of Reddit where there's heads on spikes at the front gates?
Sometimes if I see it, I'm like, oh, we're moving past this.
Nature is metal.
I've seen that.
Yeah. No. Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
What is it? Drivers are idiots.
Yeah. You got to be careful out there.
So I also follow stuff like for home brewing, for
right.
I follow a taco subreddit.
Would it surprise you to know that I subscribe and contribute regularly to the rock band subreddit?
That would not surprise me. After seeing the setup,
yeah.
Absolutely not.
Scotch is one of the subreddits I subscribe to. Now that Vicente and I are both playing Elden Ring, me on the PlayStation, him on his computer, I subscribe to Elden Ring.
I'm subscribed to the Skyrim, Witcher 3, Destiny. I have my video game ones, but then I subscribe to a brisket subreddit or a Forerunner subreddit.
The Forerunner, you said?
Mm-hmm.
I'm pulling up my list of. I'm gonna out myself. So you have your Reddits.
I'll pull mine up too.
So you have your subs, right? Do you favorite any?
I think all the ones I'm subscribed to are probably my favorites in a way.
So
if that makes sense.
I started a 26XX subreddit, but it never picked up traction. I have to change accounts. Yeah, that's another beautiful thing about Reddit, right? You got multiple accounts. But
you can go incognito.
Yeah, you can go incognito. Have you ever heard of multi-Reddits?
No.
So you can create alternative front pages and group together a variety of subreddits into a multi-Reddit. So I have one called Depth Hub, where I would just want to you want to nerd out harder. So my depth hub is academic philosophy, change my view, neutral politics, University of Reddit, museum, cultural studies, Daystrom Institute, best of, Coxeye, true music, ask politics. It goes on and on, but they're deep dives. U/Lost My Mind explains the origins of the adage every day of the week, twice on Sundays. And then there's like this wall of text where he goes into it, right? You know, and that's when you got some additional time just trying to kill. I have one set up just for the video game Destiny.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like Destiny 2, Destiny Fashion, Destiny Sherpa, Crucible Guidebook, Fire Teams, Raid Secrets, Destiny Lore, Low Sodium Destiny, which means no salt allowed, right? But my favorite that I got into hardcore was Crucible Playbook, which I think it's dead now, but it was essentially like dudes.
I was never a Crucible player.
No,
I tried.
What was it about Crucible that you didn't like?
I needed to get good.
Well, there's that. There's that, right? But part of getting good is like the
just trying, just getting in there.
Yeah,
and
trying, right? And then also the law of the pack,
Mm-hmm.
right? In terms of like, don't go in with a pickup group to a gunfight.
Yep.
Take some guys who you know, and it can shoot, move, and communicate with.
It's funny. When I lived in North Carolina and I played on my Xbox, I posted, or I'd replied to a post looking for a group.
So Destiny 1, not Destiny 2.
Destiny 1.
Okay. That makes sense.
Either looking for a group or replied to one, and I got linked up with these dental students in Jersey. And then it just became like every weekend we would just get together and play.
So we had Destiny 1 on the PlayStation. Just because we only had one account and one PlayStation, the boys and I each made a separate character. I was the hunter, Enrique was the warlock, of course, and Vicente in Vicente fashion was the
Titan.
The Titan, yeah, I'm drawing a blank. So when Destiny 2 drops, by that time I'd already completed all 3 of our gaming PC builds. Because you're not just buying one game, you're buying 3, right? But Vicente played a Titan, Enrique a warlock, and I was a hunter. That was our 3-person fire team.
But now you can play together.
But now you can play together, right? And you can go into the Crucible together. And we quickly learned, because when we were stationed in San Antonio, we used to go to PAX South,
Okay.
Which is the video game nerd conference with Penny Arcade. You know what I'm talking about?
I've heard of it.
So it's a webcomic, Penny Arcade, catered to all things within the nerd ecosystem, from board games, miniature war games, to card games, video games, comic books, like you name it, right? Cosplay. One of the events there was somebody giving essentially a TED Talk on the use over time of the ocarina in the Legend of Zelda series, right? That kind of stuff, right? Nerding out hard and
There's some real in-depth stuff on some of that.
Yeah, but while we were there, they had a booth set up for Discord. They gave a couple of stickers to the boys. The boys, slapped them on their PC, and I asked the guys, like, "What is he? Are you a gamer?" I said, "Yeah." So I'm here with my boys. We're gamers. He's like, it's like Ventrilo or TeamSpeak, but completely free. And so we tried it out. We actually have a family Discord server
Really?
that we use. And it's actually the easiest way for me to get in touch with both boys. Like, they have iPhones. We have family text and all of that. But
they answered that right away.
Because they have it installed on their phone, so they'll see it. And if they're not on their phones, they're on their computers,
And they'll see it.
right? But using Discord, going in, playing Crucible, and then in Destiny 2, they brought out Trials.
Mm-hmm.
Did you ever try Trials?
Like once with some of the guys I was with at More 4 Cyber.
So to go flawless, to get to the lighthouse, to get in-game PvP loot for an adept weapon with increased stats, right? You've got to win 7 consecutive matches, no losses, there's some flex there depending on which card you purchase, right? There's a card of forgiveness or whatever like that. But interestingly, Vicente's gotten the best over time.
Really?
And he does it in a way that I would never have contemplated, and his brother would never even attempt, which is with a breech loading single shot grenade launcher known as the Fighting Lion. And there happens to be, of course there is. There's a subreddit dedicated to that single weapon in one game. Guys dedicated to using the Fighting Lion. It's got some unique perks to it. It's an exotic, right? But if you cause damage with the grenade launcher, it allows for a quick swap to your other weapon. Him being a Titan, he runs a submachine gun. He's up in your face. He hits you with the grenade, and then next thing you know, he's just mowing you down with the sub. But it got to the point that we were looking for a clan. So where else do you go to find a clan for Destiny? Not to the Destiny forums. You go to Reddit.
Mm-hmm.
We found this clan. It's an international clan. So there's people playing 24/7. Joined up. Did an interview, told the guy that ran the clan, like, look, I'm a dad in my 40s, but I'm playing with my sons. I know it's adult, only, but, my youngest son's, his dad's a Marine. So
you had to do an interview.
Yeah, that's how they do it.
So I joined a clan. I didn't have to do an interview.
But that's how you control the community, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's when, being a dad gamer, you make sure that a boy's not, out there with some crazies.
No, makes sense.
On the internet, right? And so the fact that they're interviewing me, that's a good indication, right? The guy, his name is Yash. We're internet buddies now, right? As things go, he's a software engineer, works for Amazon. He's like, hey, would you mind being a moderator? Like we could use like a dad type vibe around to kind of keep the
keep everything in check.
keep the unruly masses. I was like, yeah, I mean, I don't mind at all. And so we did, and but the boys got to get involved into the clan, playing at their distinct playing times. We weren't always on together at the same time. You're doing your single player stuff and so on and so forth. And Enrique has his little group of guys, and there's some overlap between Vicente and his, and I'll get in and do my thing. But for me, I'm no interest in raiding.
No,
I don't like strikes. None of the hamster wheel stuff that they build into the game to keep you coming back for the loots. It's all about decision making.
Okay.
A cognitive advantage in terms of like locate, close with, and destroy. And kind of being a hunter. Also, in terms of more information than your opponents have available to them, going into stealth, into crouch, reducing your signature, getting off of their radar, all of those things. And Vicente's looking at my loadout one day. We were taking a break, getting something to eat, cooking a HelloFresh or whatever, and I just kept my game open. And he goes into my office. He's looking. He's like, I see now why you make the choices that you do. And I'm like, what do you mean? He's like, no one else is rocking a Mida, which allows you to keep your radar up while you're using your scope. And it's like, it's a nail driver. It's the closest thing that I've seen to like an M16 or a service rifle. But just recently, a couple of seasons back, they dropped. Essentially, it's a rifle. It's a repeater, scout rifle. It's called Dead Man's Tail, but you can hip fire that bad boy like nobody's business. And once you trigger, I think it's called Cranium Spike. Once you can do enough damage with headshots, you start doing more exponential damage.
Oh, really?
You'll know that you've achieved that effect when you hear the spaghetti western, and so then. But every time I hear that, lizard brain activated and fucking, controlling that lane or that alley or whatever the case may be. But the thing about that clan was it was more PvE centric. There wasn't a lot of PvP players.
Okay. And
so I talked to Yashi about that. I say, hey, look, man, you don't have that big of a PvP group, but you've got. I've noticed some heavy hitters. They just they don't play together at the same time. Maybe during the weekends or, evenings or whatever, set up some events and you could start to grow that subculture. He's like, well, we used to have this guy, just never worked out, whatever. He's like, but, if you don't mind, put something on. I said, here's what I'll do. From Destiny 1, I had a list of Crucible Sherpas that I would play with, guys that, hey, I'm an all-star and I'm looking to play with some people that want to unlock these achievements just for internet points, right? For some orange red internet points.
For some fake internet points.
Yeah. and so, you would, Roger up underneath their reply to their comment or their post and upvote them. And if they carried you to the lighthouse, you confirmed it and they got more internet points and so on and so forth. Well, in Destiny 1, I got to know some of those guys. I made a list on my iPhone, it's still in my notes. So I reached out to them, see if they were playing cross-platform or on PC, whatever. And lo and behold, there were several of them that were still active and remembered me. And so I put together like a squad of mentors, senseis, Sherpas, whatever. We started doing, because I don't think they had it in Destiny 1, but in Destiny 2, you can do private matches.
I don't remember if it was in the first one or not.
So you could set, pick your map, set the rules, and then we would create our own modification. Like, can't use this, you got to use this. You can only run, a fire team can only have one of this weapon, so on and so forth, to kind of balance things out a little bit more evenly. And so we started to grow this like little,
and use it as a teaching
click.
tool.
Some of the guys that we ended up attracting were YouTube content creators and so forth. We started putting on seminars.
Really?
Yeah. And so, but the funnest part was, so I bring in, so the clan mates show up, they have to sign up and register on the Discord channel and kind of grew that community that way. And then I would do the matchmaking using, because if everybody's locked in on Destiny Tracker or Crucible Tracker, you can get their stats and know their KD averages and what their loadout is and what they run, what their class was, not their class, but their spec, if they're running solar or you name it. And that season, I think stasis was broken to a certain extent, so only one person could run stasis, but so on and so forth. But when we're going through and I'm matching them up, so it's 3 of our Iron Wolves versus 3 of our Iron Wolves, but I put them in separate voice channels.
Okay.
And then I assign them each a mentor. They have to turn on their stream so the mentor can watch as they're playing and provide them feedback and analysis and suggestions in real time as they're playing. Like, reload, like, what are you doing? Like, push, pull back. You like and just kind of coaching them along.
That's wild.
Almost as if we would do in a CQB train shoot house scenario. But where it got really interesting was sometimes I would have as many Sherpas show up as students because the Sherpas were getting something out of it.
Well, it helps them.
Yeah, because they're having to articulate what they do, why they do it, how they do it, when they do it, etc. That the decision-making process was starting to improve as a result. Some of the guys that we were bringing in were actually paid carries, meaning there's sites that you can go on to on the internet where
you can pay to
get
whatever you
to get back to the lighthouse to do that 7 consecutive win streak and get that best gear.
But teaching makes you better at what it is, and I learned that as an instructor at Stone Bay.
Yeah,
I already knew everything I was teaching, but now I had to really know it for the random questions that we weren't teaching entry level guys. These were all, it was all 2000 level tasks, but and a lot of my original students, they all had combat experience, so you couldn't bullshit them,
right?
So I had to be on top of my game, standing up there in front of them, because when they graduate, they're now my peers.
Yep.
As a SOX F.
Right.
So if I taught them bad, then I'm just screwing over everybody else.
You're screwing yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Because now I got to work with them.
Exactly. One of the interesting pieces, I think probably one of the favorite moments once we started to generate that type of cohesion, community, in terms of like testing each other. was when I would make it an all Sherpa match, and so then the students got to watch
How they do
the
it.
instructors go at it 3-on-3, and I'm still doing the matchmaking, and I'll put this guy with that guy and this guy with that guy, and watching these guys, the level of decision making, the level of precision, the cohesion, just intuitive understanding of what your partner was going to do, and trying to read and respond to your adversary's movements and choices. Those OODA loops are going at a cyclic rate. The feedback that we got from the Sherpas and the students was like, when can we do this again? But what they didn't expect was how at the end of the sessions, I would do a hot wash.
Yeah.
What did we learn? Right. And that piece was, and I kind of explained it, was these are things that we do in the military, in the Marine Corps, in terms of,
It's just it's normal for us.
right. And there's a lot of overlap there, or I guess relevance in terms of a first person shooter game that includes, team-based mechanics, how you clear a room. And of course, like, there's some aspects like he's got a super enabled, like, so you gotta run, but so it's not a perfect analogy, but it does allow for reps and sets in a way that I think would be beneficial if it was modified just enough to be applicable to where we've projected our future operational environment, particularly if it incorporated the electromagnetic spectrum.
Okay.
So imagine a Destiny shooter where one of the classes is your SOX F or your 2600, and he, and only he, can visualize the electromagnetic spectrum. And when the adversary's communicating or emanating a signature, you mouse wheel click on it, and then it distributes it and populates it into the visual display of your teammates in a manner that you don't even have to communicate. You just mouse over it, click the mouse wheel button, and boom, that TAC rep is pushed out appropriately. And if we get, I guess maybe after a couple of consecutive kills, kind of like Call of Duty, you unlock a kill streak, you could jam enemy comms.
Yeah.
Right? Or intercept enemy comms, which is all available in gameplay just by tweaking some of the code and bending it to our will so that we can leverage products that are already out there, just modifying them just enough. And I asked earlier about Fortnite because Epic owns Fortnite. Epic also bought Rock Band, by the way. But they have a program called Epic, I think it's Mega Grants. They're giving away like millions of dollars a month, right, for use cases or projects, or to get Unreal Engine, which is like their real moneymaker, out into underrepresented applications, communities. So if that's military, commercial, academic,
Really?
whatever. Because Unreal Engine is free to use.
Yeah.
It's when you start to monetize it that's when you start to have to pay for it. But it's object-oriented engine, and so the models already exist. The concept already exists in abundance, right? You can, if it's Titanfall or Black Ops or Watch Dogs, I mean, like there's a bunch of different represented models that we could go off of in order to kind of design it and tweak it to what we needed it to be. But it goes back to, I don't know if you had ever heard of Marine Doom.
No.
So back in, I want to say it was 94, 95 time frame, when General Krulak was the commandant. He enabled or directed or approved, authorized McWill to modify ID's Doom for Marine purposes, and then authorize it to be installed on what would be now McSyn assets.
Really?
For Marines to play. Wired did a whole write-up about it.
I'm gonna have to look this up.
There's a Marine Corps order on it, because that's one way in which we could fail faster. It's another way in which we could articulate experientially what we want the force, the entirety of the service, from Lance Corporal to Lieutenant Colonel, where we're headed and why, to include persistent ISR or some of these UAS platforms that we're experimenting with. And it would allow for us to read between the lines of where the commandant is taking us. in a manner that is visceral. It's not something you just read, you experience it.
It's funny that you say so we can fail faster.
So we can fail faster.
Because that made me think of one of the battalions today talking about their upcoming battalion field X. They're like, we have to show where we're going to fail.
Right.
We know we have.
The emperor has no clothes. Go put your clothes on.
We know we're going to fail. It's just a matter of where. And the sooner that we learn that, we can correct it or identify it. Like, all right, we know this is going to fail, but we can't do anything about it right now. But in a year, 2 years, technology, capabilities, people catch up, it'll be addressed.
Yeah. Yeah, I haven't been able to crack the code on how we would be able to modify an existing video game or craft something from scratch. I'm not a coder. I could conceptualize and design it. I mean, I've done that before, but someone else would have to take that and run with it. But I think that it would be a great way to. It's beyond, what do I know? Who else needs to know it? Have I told them? Do they understand? Could I create a virtual X-Men style danger room for them to shoot, move, communicate?
It's a lot different than the let me roll the dice war game.
And I've seen that, man, and it's so frustrating because this is how we're attempting to validate our hypotheses.
With the dice.
Yeah. Nat 20, right? And that's how, but that bog sat, bunch of guys sitting around a table is still a component of force design in a manner in which I think could be improved if we just had, I would say, a little bit more creativity and ingenuity in terms of allowing us to, experiment in a manner that doesn't necessarily have to be physical. It could be virtual or augmented.
Absolutely. I want to say, I think the Army's doing some stuff. I'd have to talk to Stancil, because I know we're going to put Becker when he comes out.
He's sharp, man. I like him a lot. I met him, I want to say I first met him at Goodfellow at a TNR Manual conference.
Because he was down at Goodfellow for a while. But no, I think he and I were talking the other day because somebody mentioned the Army's Project Convergence, which I first heard about on, I want to say, the Irregular Warfare podcast. The Chief of Staff for the Army mentioned some of the stuff that we're doing. And I told Becker, I was like, hey, this is right up your lane. I told him that.
Mention some of the stuff that we're doing or some of the stuff that they're doing?
They are doing.
Are we collectively as the United States Department of Defense?
That the Army specifically is doing. And I reached out to Stancil and was like, hey, I heard this. What are we as a Marine Corps doing? Well, not much. And he sent me some documentation that he had, but it was almost exactly what I heard on the podcast.
Yeah.
I was like, all right, well, that's not, there's more to it, I know, but.
Yeah, there is. And a lot of it is we're deliberately approaching force design in a manner that will allow us to be ready when we need to be ready. But, as we all know and teach our junior Marines and learn coming up, the enemy gets a vote.
If you look at what's going on right now,
right?
It's a great example.
Yeah. Because we started off with near peer competitors to peer competitors to great power competition. Now it's strategic competition. Like all of those modifications to terminology were deliberate decisions. And much in the same way, what you say to your junior Marines matters. And what you say openly in the information environment matters. And I think that goes back to, I would say, the justification for information as a warfighting function, just because of the fact that that's not intelligence impacting the gameplay, right? From a game theory perspective, that's information. And you can analyze it and then create a product and generate an IPB. Well, then, yeah, that's intelligence. But it's so dynamic and so fast that you have to get ahead of it so that it doesn't become hindsight or just insight. It starts to become foresight.
I think we, as the United States government, have not been good about the information campaign, if you will.
I would say it's safe to say we've been getting our ass kicked.
Yes. We're still not doing great, but we're doing better with the current conflict, I think, we're not ahead of the Russia information campaign, but we're countering it pretty good, I would say. I think I don't know if you saw so after Putin said Kiev's always been a part of Russia, the U.S. Embassy in Kyiv posted a picture of Kyiv across the timeline and Moscow across the timeline. And Kyiv's been a city forever, and Moscow was just a forest. I was like, whoever's running that,
yeah,
like good on them.
That's some Chief Warrant Officer Bobby Yarbrough style.
Good on them.
Have you heard of Chief Warrant Officer Yarbrough?
No.
I want to say he's down at MSgt or Paris Island. I don't know. He got into a Twitter banner or firefight with some of the old corps, and just the way in which he handles things. I think he's a prime example. I've never met him. Definitely would love to interact with him. But as far as Comstrat guys go, definitely apex predator level proficiency, expertise, competence. If the snippet of observation time that I've had on his trade craft counts for anything. He's getting it right.
I saw that and I was like, we need to get our comp strat on that level.
Yeah. And that's one piece I haven't had much exposure with, because
I don't think a lot of us have, because we all, it was, you're going to go to combat camera, get your photo done, or they'll maybe attach to a unit, but that's all we knew for the longest time.
You said something earlier, and I want to go back to it and kind of dig a little deeper on it. You said, I'm an iPhone guy.
Yeah.
As though like you identify with Apple.
So,
like, I grew up in Texas where you had men in my family were either a Chevy man or a Ford man, because that was a truck they drove back and forth to work. That's what they picked the kids up from school with, drove them to baseball games, did work around the house with, move a refrigerator, that type of stuff. So it's like the truck was an extension of their personality. But here in 22, I have a grown-ass Marine in front of me says, I'm an iPhone man.
I'm an iPhone man.
Yeah.
Why? I bought into the Apple ecosystem pretty early on. I had the first iPhone.
You bought into it. That's a very specific phrase.
I have a Mac at the house, just MacBook, the older MacBook Pro where you could upgrade the hard drive.
Yeah, no more.
They don't make it like that.
Nah.
I put a solid state in it, upgraded the RAM.
What was the first year that you went Apple?
So I'd say when the first iPhone came out.
So it was the phone. Interesting.
It was, and
so that's around 2008.
Yeah.
Yeah.
2008.
That's when. So I grew up on Apples because, and I don't know exactly what the reasoning behind it was, but I think Macs were injected into the public school system, in, at least in Texas or at least in Galveston.
We didn't have them up in Denton.
Yeah, and I was in a magnet school because it was primarily black, but if you were other ethnicities, you were bused there, and they called them magnet classes, but you could take piano, computer, art, several different electives, right? Which normally wasn't available to, elementary. But of course, I took computers, and the computers that we had were Apple IIe's.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, OG in the game, and like Control, Open Apple, Reset, and Closed Apple. Like I remember those things, but I didn't actually buy my own until 2008 when I got back from the MU. That one that you could upgrade RAM and the hard drive with, and of course you can't do that anymore. But the iPhone was the leader for you.
It was, because all my PCs were all Windows before that, and then I got my iPhone, and it all just worked. It was all designed, and it worked together almost seamlessly.
Yeah.
So that was the point. I still have my MacBook, but I have a little netbook at the house that has.
What kind of netbook do you have?
It's just an Asus, just cheap one. I threw Ubuntu on there just to play around. Nothing special.
Yeah, so like we have Apple all throughout the house, from the TVs to the Apple TVs to the iPhones. I've got a MacBook. Liz has a MacBook. Boys have iPads. Enrique, as he started class at St. Mary's, I started him off with my MacBook. He said, "Dad, I need a Windows machine for programming, coding. Like all of the stuff from school was not Apple friendly." So we ended up. I took my MacBook back and I got him an Asus. I think it was an Asus.
Should have just had a VM.
We could have done that. But there was a. I think it was a learning curve for him for that, which probably would have been good now that I think about it. Good, right?
Good.
But we got a hell of a deal at the PX here at Fort Belvoir. Ended up getting it for like $700. It was like $1,200, normal price, no tax. We also built gaming PCs, and so for me, I wanted the boys to be proficient with both. Not only does she have the MacBook, she also has an iMac, and then Vicente has an iMac in his room too. But he mostly just uses it to fiddle with GarageBand, and then we have for the music production suite that we use is by Native Instruments, and it works on Windows or Mac. But he seems to prefer doing digital creation, at least for music, on the Mac. He's been pestering me to get a copy of Logic.
Okay.
Which is their audio production suite. I don't know if you've ever.
I've heard of it.
Tweaked it with it or played with it, but it's GarageBand to the next level, right? And I've had older copies of it, my older MacBooks. I've toyed with the idea of getting it, but for me, I've settled on Adobe Audition for audio production and editing, or at least audio editing and podcast production. But music production is a different animal.
I can imagine.
So for Vicente, as he's playing with his Adobe apps and After Effects and so on and so forth, as he started to dabble into music production, he's registered a demand signal for Logic, as you can imagine. But I think that it's important for the boys to be able to be proficient with both. I chose Apple because of the distinction between the Windows environment that we contend with at work.
Yeah.
And like you said, the fact that it just works.
Their ecosystem works together. So my daughter has an iPad, so I can FaceTime my daughter.
Yep.
with me living on the West Coast and my wife living on the East Coast, when we're not at work, we essentially live on FaceTime. I have a stand for, we each have a stand for our iPads. We'll just dial in and go about our day, our life, just with it. So we just live on FaceTime, and it's helpful that way.
I think one of the interesting things is I read an article somewhat recently that in the world of the teenager, if you send somebody a text or there's a group text and someone pops up with a green message and it's not blue, it's like they're almost ostracized or bullied or picked on.
That's funny.
Yeah, I don't know if I would, bully somebody on that fact alone, but I do prefer seeing blue pop up as opposed to the green.
Like I said, it's having Apple. It has made living apart a lot easier. At least for us. It's still not perfect, but
yeah,
it makes it easier.
Well, I'll tell you what, let's take a break. I'll make a head call and we'll get around.
Yeah.
Yeah, so yesterday and the day before I had some of those, they sell
The pre-made.
Yeah, ice spheres. Jerome's like, oh, I didn't know they did this. They do at Wegmans.
You can get anything at Wegmans.
It's a magical place.
That's what I discovered when I moved to Maryland. I was like, what is this thing called Wegmans? And I was doing all my grocery shopping at Wegmans, and I was like, ooh, I can't be doing that.
Yeah, it can get out of hand quickly.
Like this is something else.
Do you have a preference?
No. So I need to get one of those.
One of what? The mold?
The mold like that. I have a small one, and it's got 6, and like you basically close it together and you pour in from the top.
Yeah.
But the problem is it spreads out throughout it. So now, I have that, and then I have the squares.
So these are Tivolo, or I think is the name of the company. It was a DEA agent that introduced me to them.
Really?
I had a buddy of mine in Okinawa. He's a Navy officer. He swears by the fact that you have to get them clear. So he's got this whole system of boiling the water and doing this and that. And I'm like, I don't care if they're foggy or not. I just... it's just ice.
It's ice.
Right? So I got some Mortlock. I don't know if you've had that before.
What's that?
This is a 12-year, the Wee Witchy, an ode to the steel that bears the beast of Dufftown. But it's good. You try that?
Yeah. I don't think I've ever.
Make sure I don't get it on my book. And I'm going to go with some Balvenie. I have to admit, I was kind of disappointed in Mark's the other night because he was like, nah, I just want Jack and Coke. Quantity over quality. I'm like, what? Said no Master Guns ever. Hope he hears this and feels called out.
Jack and Coke.
Me and Jack have a little bit of a history. I was a freshman in high school at, we're recording already. I was a freshman in high school when one of my baseball buddies,
When you two got introduced to each other?
Danny Higgins, had stolen a bottle from his dad's liquor cabinet. We were at a high school party at the Fireman's Hall. Somebody had rented it out. Some adult turned the keys over to some kids, and we're there. And they're charging.
Left a bottle.
Well, they had kegs.
Oh.
Yeah, and they're charging admission to get in. I think it was like $5 to get in or something like that. And this is in 91, 92 time frame. And he's like, Sam, hey, come over here. And Danny and I played for the Little League baseball team, Schreiber and Miller. And I don't know if my dad coached the year that I'm getting ready to talk about it or not, but my dad was one of my baseball coaches throughout my childhood. It's one of the reasons why I've always felt like I needed to live up to that with him. Kind of being the example to supersede, not just to meet up to. But there was a team on the west end of the island where the more affluent kids lived.
Okay.
They were Bank of Galveston. And so the way Galveston Little League was broken up was there were 4 divisions: Central, East, West, and Island, which was like far west on the island. And the west, it was the west division that Bank of Galveston was in, and each of the divisions had 4 teams. So of the 4 teams, there was a red team, a blue team, a green team, and a black team in terms of like their colors. And each team was sponsored by a different business or organization in the community. Our team was Schreiber and Miller, which was a furniture company. We were a red team in the Central League or Central Division of the league. And the initials on our baseball cap were S&M. And as kids do, we turned that into a nickname. So Schreiber and Miller became Space Monkeys. That was the name of our team. But Bank of Galveston had like it was like some ungodly 38-0 winning streak. And at the end of the season, the top 2 teams from each division would meet in a Final Four style tournament, the city tournament for Little League champs. And the winner of the tournament got a steak dinner at Western Sizzlin', right? and there was a gentleman, I'm going to mess up his last name, but I want to say it was Charles Sturgill or something like that. He was the sports writer for the Galveston Daily News and did a really great job of capturing like the essence and the drama of Little League baseball. Right. And
because it's there.
It is, man. I mean, it was our world, right? During that summertime. And the island is brutal. Right. And we made it to the playoffs, or we made it to the tournament. Us and Elks Lodge, where a lot of my buddies from the blue team from Central League were on Elks Lodge. And some of my best friends that I still maintain contact with were on my Schreiber Miller team. And Danny Higgins was our pitcher. But we made it to the finals. And he pitched, I think maybe a 2-hitter, something crazy like that. I remember me and a couple of the other guys, and I think even Danny did too. We made a bunch of Ks. It's like, how many Ks do you think we're going to need? It's like, well, it's 9 innings. We strike out everybody. That's 27. It's like, man, you're not going to strike out 27 people. It's like, how many Ks do we need? So I think we ended up settling on like I don't know, 12 or 15 or whatever, but whatever it was, we used them all. But that was like probably one of the best steak dinners I've ever had in my life. Yeah, tough like little sirloin or whatever, burned it medium well or you name it. But those bonds, those moments, and then you fast forward several years. Now we're freshmen in high school. He's like, Sammy, come on. So it was like, here, have some. And that's where I learned that Jack and I don't get along. Yeah. But, years later, I meet a woman named Elizabeth. She introduced me to the Scotch. Salute.
My wife, Bree, introduced me to Scotch.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
What were you drinking beforehand?
Beer, because I made my own beer.
Yeah. So I like a beer, but
and I had lived in Southern California.
Okay.
When craft beer started
to kind of blow up. Yeah.
Yeah.
I got a good buddy of mine. Him and his wife. Actually, they're more Liz's friends than mine growing up, but we become friends after we got married and got to know them. They own a restaurant and a brewery in San Antonio. It's called Southerly. And just like the whole story behind like how they established their business and had the good fortune to be able to expand. Everything down to their logo is still, even though it's in San Antonio, reminds me of Galveston. And one of the things that they did for their slogan, it's "May our paths cross."
May our paths cross.
Yeah. And the leaves on their logo resemble the magnolias from back home, and but a lot of the offerings on their menu that Jeff serves, he's the chef. His buddy, his business partner, is the brewmaster, but he draws heavily from that Cajun seafood style that I grew up eating on the island. Like I can't have just hot boiled shrimp. And when I was up in Maine, this last origin immersion camp, like seafood has to have, particularly shellfish, has to have some heat to it. It just like butter just doesn't do it for me. I don't know. Maybe I'm off. I don't know.
We don't eat a lot of shellfish because she's allergic to it.
Okay.
Now, I can eat it myself and there's no issues.
You ever get down with crawfish?
No.
I don't like them either. Too much work.
Yeah. No,
I'd rather have a shrimp.
Growing up, we used to go catch them.
Yeah.
But no, it was never crawfish, never my thing. I like shrimp.
What about what's your favorite fish?
Ooh, it's rough.
Like, when you go to a restaurant, do you ever order a fish?
I don't. I like my fish raw.
Yeah, it took me a while to get down with sushi. Okinawa will break you of that deficiency quickly.
We used to go to this place. You'd leave the main gate there on Camp Courtney, hang a left, and it wasn't too far down. And it was like on the right hand side, and they had a conveyor. It was the conveyor belt.
The sushi
stuff.
go round. Yeah,
and that's where we would go.
So George Garcia, Sergeant Major type, who we went to boot camp together, right? And he was, we were on the same SST in Iraq for a minute before he got his own team. He was our sponsor in Oki, and that was one of the first restaurants we went to go eat at out in town. It was Jin's restaurant, right outside of Camp Foster. Man, the boys love that place. And to the point that, most recently we found a sushi place here that it's not too bad. Right up the road. And, Vicente was down to try things that I wouldn't, like the sea urchin sushi. And
I've tried it. Not my jam, but
yeah,
I've tried it.
But I'll give it to the kid. He'll expand his own horizons, left to his own devices. But, as a father, you sometimes worry about that.
Mm-hmm.
He's experimental to the point that, so we get here mid-COVID, settle in Lorton, and the first year was completely virtual, and he fucking hated it. Completely.
So my daughter's 7, so she did kindergarten in person. She did all of first grade virtual, and she is a social butterfly.
Yeah.
So having to do it virtually, I don't know how she did it. Not long. So I moved out September of 20, and her mom kind of made me do a ROM before I even got to see her.
Yeah. That's funny.
But I picked, because I'd driven across the country.
Yeah, I mean, I get it.
But I picked her up, and I had her for probably about a week or so, just to spend time with her. And the first day, she dials into school, and before she even starts, she goes, "This is my dad." had to introduce dad on Zoom.
That's funny.
I was like, hey.
But even Liz was miserable teaching on from a virtual posture, and the minute that some position became available at the day at headquarters, out of the classroom as a program specialist and so forth, she took it, and it made a world of difference for her. But once they were able to get into the classroom, and even before they got into the classroom, they were able to do band practice after school in the parking lot there at the high school right around the corner. And he started to enjoy that social interaction, and so the band became the vehicle through which he was able to recover from the isolation.
He mentioned doing the spring, what was it, spring marching season or whatever?
Yeah. And in a way that we couldn't have predicted or imagined, it became his circle. And once he kind of recovered, he then became the glue for some of the other kids around him. And they had a little ragtag group of kids that would come over, they'd hang out. I was like, "Is it okay? What do you think?" I was like I can't justify, maintaining this level of isolation indefinitely. He needs it.
Mm-hmm.
It's a calculated risk. It's moderate, right? That kind of shit. But the kids would come over. They played rock band. They go ride bikes. Go to the grocery store or the 7-Eleven or whatever, and get snacks or whatever, and just hang out. Started off making them hang out outside in the back patio up there, but eventually, they creep inside and play video games, and it's like one thing led to another, and they're still wearing their masks, but whatever. And
it's rough.
It is.
It's rough. So my daughter was with. So her mom works full time, for the Navy. So she wasn't virtual at that point. She was still having to work, or when she did go virtual, she had to work. So having her do school, she couldn't do it. So one of my daughter's friends, she went to her house. So they're all the same age. And so she got to be with at least somebody they weren't in the same class, but
Yeah.
she had that social interaction during the day. So I think it helped her a lot, but I couldn't imagine being completely.
Yeah. But so the following year, the band director asked Vicente if he would consider playing the tuba. He's like, I'm a trumpet player. He's like, yeah, but we don't have tuba players.
Like you said, they had one
Yeah.
tuba player.
Yeah. And that young lady is a Space Force brat. Phenomenal young lady. She's awesome. And her and Vicente have become really good friends. I would almost be interested to see what would happen if somebody was picking on her in front of Vicente.
He said she's tough.
She is tough, but I'd be interested to see how that would play out. And he took the band director up on the offer. He picked up the tuba, and over the course of the football season, moving that thing around up and down, he started to develop little biceps. And his core started to get tight, and he's stretching, and like his body is changing. And Liz is like, he's not a little kid anymore. I said, no, he's a young man. Like that's life. And he became the center of this little group of mutants in much the way that his brother did in Okinawa. And, Liz is like, that's you. I said, nah, that's you. Like, you do that too. Like, and it's become our collective understanding. That's who we are.
Mm-hmm.
Like, we put down roots. We gather around us those individuals that, we enjoy their company and they enjoy ours. And we make the most of the time that we have. And so towards the end of the season, the band director and some of his subordinate staff that focus on like key elements within the marching band, started approaching Vicente for him to consider joining drumline or, the front ensemble and all this other stuff. And I was not a band nerd, did not like understand any of that. Liz was the drum major in our high school, so she's up there with the white gloves. Like,
well, he and I got to nerd out about it
Okay.
yesterday because I was in band.
Yeah. and so right? Like, but there are things that go on in Virginia that do not go on in Texas. And one of those things is Winter Guard. And I asked, he comes home and he says the color guard girls asked me to join Winter Guard. I was like, what's that? He's like, well, it's like with the rifles and the flags and stuff. I was like, huh? I thought you were gonna do drumline because the drumline instructor had talked to me and you about you playing the drums. He's like, I don't want to play just one drum. I want to play the drum kit because that's what he does when he plays rock band here at the house. And it's like, well, the front ensemble has a drum kit. And he's like, there's another guy that already does that, and I'm not going to take that away from him. So I'm going to do Winter Guard. I'm like, okay. And Liz is like, Mijo, is there something you need to tell us? And I didn't understand. He's like, what do you mean? She's like, what? Like, Winter Guard is you're wearing like tights and makeup and flags and rifles. Like, he's like, Mom, I'm straight. Right? So I was like, okay, all right. But
He probably dead-faced,
yeah,
deadpan.
yeah, exactly. Right? Delivered it cleanly. But so we go, right? And so it's kind of like this weird mashup of spandex or compression, right? No-gi gear, right? With makeup and flags and choreography and interpretive dance, like all of these things all into one, but they've got to coordinate their movements, and there's a certain amount of trust as they throwing these rifles up, for 3 or 4 flips, all the way up to the rooftops and in the gymnasium.
As he was explaining it to me yesterday, I was like, "Is it like the silent drill team?" He goes, "Yep, just like that." I was like, "Okay."
Yeah. And so when I go to the first competition, it was at the first time I saw him flip a rifle up and then catch it, and it was like that handguard slap.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, "Oh, I get it now."
Yeah, when he was talking about the right, that was exactly what I thought about. I was like, "I wonder if it's like that."
Yep. It's that, but flipped on its head and taken in a completely different direction. But there are those elements of it, especially in terms of the cohesion and the camaraderie and the practice and all of that. And he's the only guy on South County's team. And when we've gone to some of the competitions, he's probably not the only straight guy. He's one of the few straight guys that's doing it. Which, with Enrique being openly gay, like that's not an issue, but it just is, right? But the one part that interested me the most was he's going to perform, and then his girlfriend shows up to watch him and like cheer him on. And I looked at Liz, I was like, I would never have had this level of courage that this kid does, right? Like not only am I going to do this, but I'm also going to have my girl come watch me, right?
Babe, come watch this.
Yeah. Watch me do this interpretive dance and flip this rifle and these flags, and it was amazing. Liz was like, "Are you okay with this?" I said, "Yeah. I mean, of course. He's my boy, right?" But the way in which he carries it and the way he handles it, like there's no worry in the world. He's just doing this thing, and either you get with it or you get rolled over, or you get along, and I love that about him. Right.
When I asked him about it yesterday, I was like, "What's winter guard?" And he kind of paused, looked at me, and goes, "Why?" I was like, "I want to know." And he started explaining it to me. I was like, "Oh, okay."
Yeah.
And then after he explained that, that's when I found out he was in the band.
Yeah.
And I was like, I used to play saxophone. He was like, "Get out of here."
Yeah. So we had a competition for winter guard. It was about maybe almost a 2-hour drive from here. And, Liz is, of course, like all in, vice president of the band boosters. And, one of the other tuba girl is also doing winter guard.
Okay.
And so she was the one that really convinced Vicente to do it. So it's like, we're tubas, we stick together, we do this. You can't just go to drum line and because her sister is in the drum line. She's like, yeah, that'd be like treason or whatever. And so they do drumline together, and their mom, she's a Space Force spouse. She's the volunteer coordinator, so she's putting together all like the requests for drivers from parents because they just didn't have the money to pay for a charter bus. So we Liz of course has the 8-pack soccer mom assault vehicle. So Vicente and 5 girls jump in the back, and Liz is driving, and Dad's the DJ. And so, I'm asking them, all right, so I'm the DJ. I got Apple Music and Spotify because I'm a baller like that. And
which one are we going with?
Yeah, like you just tell me what you want to hear, and as long as you're okay with expletives, I'll play whatever you want. And then I'll occasionally inject my own music into the mix. And so we go on this road trip, 2 hours there, and then compete, and then 2 hours back. We make this playlist, the most eclectic playlist you could imagine. Let me see if I can pull it up. But when we get to
did you name it?
I did. It's just Winter Guard.
Just Winter Guard?
Yeah. First song, Let's Go, The Royal We by Run the Jewels. That was my pick. And then somebody picked Hot Wings, I Want to Party by will.i.am, Jamie Foxx, and Anne Hathaway. I don't know why. We Belong Together, Mariah Carey. I added that for Liz.
Okay.
Boom Clap by Charlie XCX. Bussin' by Nicki Minaj and Little Baby. Boss Bitch by Doja Cat. Workout by J. Cole. I added that. Shake It Off by Taylor Swift. One of the girls requested that. But then
It's all over the place.
yeah, but then they completely lost it when they realized that I knew all the words to Shake It Off and I was dancing and singing like car karaoke style. And they're like, Mr. Castro, are you a Taylor Swift fan? I said, no, I'm a Swiftie. And they're like, oh my God. And this is like, he is not lying. He has this thing about Taylor Swift and just, they were just, they couldn't believe it. And then after that, I played The Game, Old English, which is as hardcore a West Coast gangster rap song as you could play for a soccer mom assault vehicle full of
kids,
full of teenage girls. Yeah. You're like, and one of the girls, she's one of the black girls. She said, "Oh, this is a violent song." So I was like, "Okay," I went to the next track, put on something a little bit more vibing, and it was, of course, Notorious B.I.G. Hypnotize. Then we went to some Pac because I can't play Biggie without playing some Pac. And then we went into some of the more current pop stuff like Cold Heart with Elton John and Dua Lipa and then Lil Nas X, Industry Baby. And
do you have any Gaga in there?
We did some Chainsmokers, Travis Scott, Post Malone, Kendrick Lamar, Kanye West, The Pretenders. That was Liz's request. Brass and Pocket. That's her jam. She'll sing that all the time on Rock Band. Some Red Hot Chili Peppers, Soft Cell, Tainted Love, Stevie Nicks, Edge of 17, Sublime,
Okay.
Santeria, Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers, Breakdown. And then we started going into like some of the songs that the kids play on Rock Band. And you know, when we had that Rock Band party here at the house for St. Patrick's Day, you know, some of the people that were here didn't know. A lot of the people here that were here didn't know each other because it was some of Liz's circle of
Some of yours.
work friends and military spouse network and veteran support organization networks that she interacts with, and then of course some of the Marines, and so you know just kind of linking them all up. Luke Ravel, the new SEA to the Durant, he's like, next time, man, you got to do name tapes, dog, so that everybody knows. Like, you know, hey, okay, all right, yeah, I remember your name is, you know, so and so. But the boys grew up being exposed to music through a video game, and they didn't just listen to it.
They interacted with it.
They touched it. They manipulated it. They collaborated on it.
When we left last night, Mike Kerbo and I were talking on the drive back because he was playing guitar. He's like, "Oh, I'm not used to the Rock Band." He goes, I was used to Guitar Hero." I was like, "I remember when Guitar Hero came out."
Yeah.
Because I bought it. Me and my roommate went half on it in the barracks, and we bought it, and we used to play it all the time. And Stevens,
Yeah.
would come over. We would drink beers in the barracks, do Guitar Hero, and just have fun.
Yeah. I mean,
And that's how like we that's what we did, right? But we were grown ass men.
Yeah.
At that point, we didn't grow up with Rock Band,
with plastic instruments and a microphone, right?
Yeah.
And so we got back from the Mew in 2008. It had just dropped. At that time, I was listening to a podcast called Massively Online Gamers, MOG, and like the MOG audience were the MOG army. And they had been talking this game up for, you know, episode after episode. And so when it dropped, I was like, oh yeah, and that's how I got the backstory. So the guys that created Rock Band, I can't think of their names off the top of my head, but they were the founders of harmonics, were the original creators of Guitar Hero.
Okay.
And it started off as a project for their MIT, I don't know if it's undergrad or postgrad studies, but they developed a prototype for using a joystick to create music in a way that didn't require the level of dedication and practice that
An actual musician needs.
Right, exactly. In order to kind of bring people in a little bit further, to get over that fear of trying.
Mm-hmm.
And when, Vicente was 2, was when he was first exposed to Rock Band,
Okay.
right? And so, we would give him, I bought a plastic guitar that wasn't a Rock Band guitar, and just that was his thing when he was 2, 3, 4, 5. And then later he realized, wait a minute, my shit's not connected. Like, there's no lights here. Like, what's going on? It's bullshit, Dad. Like, and so give him one, but then you disconnect the dongle. But then he realizes it's not connected, and he's like plugging it back in, and he's missing all the notes. But
He's having fun.
over time. And we have videos of him just like jamming out like he was Eddie Van Halen, right? And there was a time when we were stationed in San Angelo, I had to stay back. Called into work, or somebody else covered podium for me because the repairman needed to come to fix something at the house. So I didn't take him to daycare, and we had figured out you could take out collapse the drum stand so that it was almost like knee high level to a human, and he could sit in like this little mini papasan chair, and that was his drum throne.
Really?
And he would drum on that on the original kit. And the repairman's walking through the house, coming in and out, and Vicente's like drumming to Billy Idol, Rebel Yell, and he's like, little man is jamming. I said, he's trying to figure it out. Like, he's done all right, but over time, we got the E-drum kit, so I got a roll-in, TD, whatever, with the MIDI connector and, all of that, double bass, drum throne, the whole nine. And now he's on Pro Drums Expert, just nailing it. There's no way I could keep up with what he does on that. And
we had to roll up the carpet yesterday because the bass was moving.
Exactly. But to the point that when the sister of the other tuba player was over here, and she plays what's the quads,
Yeah,
for the drum line, and they're world class competitors. Their drum line. She's like, I don't know why Vicente's not playing drums. I said, oh, I'm sorry, Adelaide. In case you didn't get the memo, he is playing the drums. And she's like, you're right, Mr. Castro. You're right. She gave me a high five. She's like, touche. Like, sharp young lady. And but that goes back to like, we got this eclectic mix in here, and music being that connective tissue. And Vicente and I were talking about it. And he's like we got, the lights set up, and we got the song books and all that. And I said, yeah, but it's not about all that. It's about spending that time together. And, one of the things that I took away from General Neller's communications during his time as a commandant was how, he would deliver a message to the force, but on the back end, he would always hit that touchstone of who we are as a warfighting organization, as a fraternity, and what makes us unique, and what makes us have that something, that esprit de corps, right?
It's that bond.
Right.
I remember, you know, when I was at Radio Battalion the first time, we lived in the barracks the Marines are in now. It was all outward facing. Yeah, we played Guitar Hero, but we left the door open.
Yeah.
Guys came and went. The entire barracks had parties on the weekend. But then we'd all load up, and not every week, but like every once in a while, we'd go down to Oceanside, and yeah, like half the battalion at a karaoke bar.
Yeah.
Just because, and we'd like dominate this karaoke bar. And I don't know. It's when I, now that I'm back at Radbin, and I asked the Marines, like, what do you guys do? Like, I don't know. I'm like, oh.
You should get him a rock band kit.
I was like, we do something.
Yeah. Yeah. It became the centerpiece for us in Goodfellow. Chris Taylor, Adam Slaughter, Nick Watson, right? Like, you'd be surprised the people that we could get in front of that microphone to pick a song and get after it. Hell, even the other night, like, it took me a long time to get Derry Cross to get in front of that microphone.
He was rocking it.
Oh yeah, he loved that shit. I am so excited to see what Master Guns Derry Cross accomplishes at Goodfellow Air Force Base, being that senior staff and CO that's there when those Marines check in. And having seen him, you know, from when I met him as a corporal, when he came through for a PTP when I was at SOTG, to deploying with him on the MEU in 07, 08, to, you know, just, I mean, all of our interactions over the years, and it's been a blessing to have him with me here in the National Capital Region at Headquarters Marine Corps during his stint as a ARC field specialist. And one of our good buddies, Bobby Jackson, and I we're talking about him today, and like how much he's like grown over the years. And there was an exchange between me and another Marine that got under Derry's skin because it was seen as the Marine was out of step or out of line in the way in which they had addressed or interacted with me, and like for Derry to get
upset,
I would say protective.
Okay.
Right? Protective of Sammy in a way that like was flattering, right? Because it takes a lot to get Derry riled up, but to see that he'll get riled up for me, like, I mean, that's my brother, and it's gonna be hard to see him leave, but I am so grateful that he's gonna have the opportunity to have the impact and the influence in this new assignment for him and Joyce that he's gonna have.
We talked about, like, we mentioned like talking about the key billet. That's a key billet.
It is.
That
Most
and DLI,
definitely.
Those are key billets that we have to staff with the right people, because that's the outside of boot camp, MCT, that's their first exposure to the OC field. And I don't know. I think Kyle has done a...
Oh yeah, Kyle was great.
Yeah.
Despite what maybe Tom Dean may have thought at first, but you know, like,
but the feedback he's brought back to the community from being there,
yeah.
And now Derry's gonna go, and he's just gonna take it and keep moving forward.
Oh yeah,
It's
yeah,
it's awesome.
I am excited to have Kyle out here. It's been great to see Deuce run the conference the way in which he has. I was like, I told somebody, I think I told Martin or I don't know who. I was like, this is what it's like to be on Deuce's SST. But to the way in which he's kind of, all right, that's enough. We're gonna keep moving. All right, and you guys can sidebar that. Just
goes around and pats everybody. All right,
yep.
Sit.
Yep. And despite the some of the tension and the overt aggression that has manifested over this week, what I love about our tribe, and I told this to General Carter when I was screening to be his SEA, was that we strengthen our tribe. And in a way that it, at least at first glance, it can appear combative and hostile and pugilistic, but it's because we care. And that passion,
we absolutely do care,
man. That passion is readily apparent.
If you didn't care, you wouldn't be here.
That's true. Somebody asked me this week, like, hey, how much longer you got left? I was like, man, I just walked into this new billet, and as maybe I think some of the listeners and the guys that know me best would say that yeah, I mean, of course that's normal. I know I'm up for the task, but I also know how daunting the task is in terms of I'm no longer just a 2691. I've got to be able to embrace and approach multiple OC fields across the information
DCI
and intelligence warfighting functions in a manner that is going to be welcoming and inviting and receptive, and enabling to serve as a linchpin, and as an advocate and a champion for the entirety of that subsection of the organization. And Liz asked me, she's like, are you excited? I said, yeah, I'm also a little fucking nervous. But, I think that, and to be honest, I had some reservations about submitting for this last go-round after having whiffed, 3 times in a row. I'm batting 250, right? And before this, I was batting, a flat 0. But I asked the master sergeants that were around me, the guys that I'd been closest to in my time here, like, do we compete for this? And if the answer is yes, is it because, we want to establish that we will compete going forward, not only for the DCI, but also for the Durant and for additional joint assignments and billets across the spectrum, pun intended. And their answer was yeah. And one of the things that Sean said to me that stuck was, the intent was to put a marine of influence and a billet of influence, and I thought it should have been Sean or Kyle. But there were things that occurred, between home and work and other considerations that require them to be at different places at different times. And, from Sean, and others, Nick and the rest of the I used to refer to them before I was a Master of Guns as the Council of Kings. I don't know if I necessarily agree with that characterization at this point, but they was like, no, we're going to put we're gonna put Castro there as a master sergeant, and he's, you know, their assessment, not necessarily mine, was I was a shoo-in to get selected. And some of that is that professional paranoia. I'm not enough. I'm not ready. You know, somebody else would be a better choice. Got selected. Thought I was going to get PCA'd. Didn't happen. Keep him there, and start to put your hat in the ring, and eventually resulted in, you know, this selection to be the new SEA for DCI, and I have to admit that it was somewhat bittersweet because, you know, the other, you know, finalist or nominee was John Stansel, and he's been a guy that I've looked to for guidance and mentoring and understanding of areas that are so, you know, admittedly beyond me, that I felt like it was I mentioned to somebody, it was like, not exactly, but the closest like historical example that I could get to was me being a Mexican from Texas, right? It's like watching, like being De La Hoya boxing Julio Cesar Chavez.
Mm-hmm.
Not that I'm De La Hoya or that John's Chavez, but it felt that way, right? Like how do you stand toe to toe with somebody that you look up to?
Yeah.
But, you know, part of, I think the brilliance of this gun club of ours is that we sharpen each other. And when the time comes, even if it's at boot camp, you put the guides in the box with the pugil sticks against each other, even if there's a 40-pound weight difference.
Yep.
And you let them slug it out. Because there's no fucking weight restrictions on the battlefield, right? And, but it slanted things to where, like I said, at a minimum, it makes it bittersweet. But it is as it is.
I can imagine it's also hard. You'll have to tell me after you've been in the seat for a bit, but what you already said, like you've been focused on one OC field. Now you have to look across the spectrum of all of them.
So here's what I'll say. When I showed up here from Okie, there was a significant amount of tension and conflict based upon how I was going to be employed. And in probably a manner that approaches bravado or even braggadocio, I was like, I'm going to tell you what I'm going to do. Stop me. Because I'm looking at my boss's boss and what he's saying. And I know my boss from where I came from, Stacy Clarity, Lieutenant General type, commander of 3MEF, who looked me in the eye and said, where you're headed, you're going to carry the MEF with you in your heart. And you're going to ensure that they understand when General Berger said main focus of effort, that they remember it.
Okay.
Because that's who you are. And during my time out there, I worked for General Clarity, General Smith, General Nicholson, General Journey, by extension, General Timberlake. Like, I had a swath of exceptional leadership. And at every interaction that I had with them was a formative experience that prepared me to start to anticipate what the requirement was in a manner that if I know what they're concerned with, what keeps them up at night, and I start to address that, despite what the middle management is saying, thinking, or doing, it might cause me friction and tension in the near term and maybe even midterm. But if I could justify it, and point to the bigger picture, the guideposts, the North Star, or what the 3-star said, or the 4-star, if we're talking about the Commandant, then I know I'm headed in the right direction. That allowed me to keep my honor clean And, by the time I had some dwell time here at Headquarters Marine Corps, it proved to be accurate in terms of where I was prioritizing my efforts and activities, even if it wasn't directly tasked.
Okay.
Like, no one asked you to do that. Why are you doing that thing? Because you don't get it. And I don't have time to explain it to you, because if I sit down and walk you through step by step by step, that's effort I could have expended over here. And I'm a fucking master sergeant, and this is what needs to get done. And if you don't see that, then you're probably fucking missing it. And you're going to be gone here in a few anyway. Somebody else will be in charge, and the colonel's okay with it. Right? And that sounds insubordinate. I know. But it's the truth. And ultimately, as things settled, I was pointed in the right direction.
Yeah.
Particularly as it pertains to, as I see it, the primacy of the electromagnetic spectrum as a maneuver space. And we've had some recent exchanges over that concept, the electromagnetic spectrum as a maneuver space. And I don't think it's sufficiently comprehended across the OC field or across the warfighting organization, but it is a physical domain that touches all of the domains.
Yes.
In every warfighting function. And it's where we, as an OC field, thrive. And as the rest of the organization is downsizing, and we're deleting units with a rich and storied legacy, we're growing to be placed in a level of dispersion and depth that's unprecedented.
It shows the importance.
It does. Like, the information has to maneuver. And when it does so through the spectrum. And that piece right there goes back to, like, the strength of the wolf and the strength of the pack, and how as we composite in these 6 Marine teams detached from the battalion, and then later from the detachment to go support whatever unit we were assigned to, we have to depend on one another.
Absolutely.
In the most trying of circumstances, even if the most trying of circumstances is figuring out who we are going forward in the midst of force design. And I think the way that we get there is by applying 2 things first and foremost, as we're in these heated discussions, and assuming good intentions by applying the principle of humanity, and that the individual that's saying something is saying it because he or she genuinely believes in what they're saying, and they've thought about it and put the amount of, maybe it's analytical rigor or forethought or passion or discipline or dedication into that position that we would also place into a stance that we're taking. And then the other piece is the principle of charity. And before we argue against what that person is saying, maybe try to attempt to argue for it or reinforce it to the fullest extent possible before you argue against it.
Okay. Yeah.
So that when you argue against it, if it still requires that, you're arguing against the best form of the argument as opposed to a potentially limited form of the argument. And none of us, 2691s, 2602s, 17s, 06s, 02s know it all. And that's why we don't fight as an army of one.
No.
We go in, USMC rules of warfighting or gunfighting is like you bring everybody, right? You bring them along and you coordinate together in a manner that is going to achieve that overmatch, right? But now we're starting to learn that overmatch isn't enough. You also have to control the narrative.
Yep.
And that's where the information piece
is important.
Exactly. And I hate that Rich Dudo was right and I was wrong. But he was right. But I also appreciate the fact that even when he was right in a way that encouraged me to see that he was right. Because I wasn't applying the principle of charity and humanity at that point in time. I had too much ego into it. Like, why is information, over intelligence as a warfighting function? Like organizationally, yeah, I get it. But as 2600s, we have to demonstrate equal amounts of agility between the 2, the 3, and the 6. We are C2. We are maneuver. We are fires. We are force protection.
Mm-hmm.
And all of that, because the spectrum ties it all together. And we aren't the only ones that touch the spectrum, but we are a key component of those within the organization that touch the spectrum. And we owe the brothers to the left and right of us, the sisters to the left and right of us, our due diligence towards that effort to do the things that need to be done to be successful in that future operational environment, as I see it. But where it gets sticky is when we have the counterpoint of we focus on red, somebody else does blue. I don't know if I agree with that completely.
So we used to have a red team. John Stansel was on it. And we would red team ourselves on stuff. I think there is aspects we could focus on blue. I don't know how that would look, though.
The way I kind of see it is like you go anywhere, you have an obligation to characterize the environment.
Mm-hmm.
And knowing what you know, granted that you have done your due diligence, you know what blue is. You know what you're looking for as it pertains to red. And there are things there that are, for lack of a better term, gray.
Okay.
And eventually you're going to
You'll classify that.
Identify, characterize, and then separate appropriately. And that which you know is blue, you baseline and set aside. But should there be any deviation from that, and maybe if our capabilities are sufficient and commensurate with the task, it doesn't require the cognitive load to fixate on it because you're augmented, like centaur chess. Are you familiar with that term? So chess tournaments, mano, imano. Later, they had like Deep Blue, Kasparov and Karpov, or Kasparov, I believe, is playing against IBM's supercomputer.
Okay.
Right? And the progression from that was the best approach was to put a chess master with multiple chess engines behind them, offering up options, koas, right? Almost McPeepee style of what move you should consider, but ultimately it was up to
him to make
an intuitive decision maker that has the ability to chunk patterns in a way that the AI may not necessarily have yet, right? Because it's just not there. The engine's not strong enough yet. And so that Centaur model where you've got this engine running underneath it, but a man's abreast of it, is different than you having to do it by yourself.
Okay.
And so, should we develop the capability to process in an algorithmic or AI, ML, cognitive computing capacity, that you take a fingerprint, a sound print, or a spectrum print, and that's what normal looks like over a duration of time with the normal pattern of life applied to it. But any deviation from that would afford you the opportunity to understand when there's a negligent discharge.
Yeah.
Or potentially a surreptitious discharge, right? I mean, there could be a compromise in the system that would beacon out in a manner that would skyline us, jeopardizing our survivability and livelihood. And we would be completely oblivious to it if we didn't take that into consideration.
Because we're not looking for it.
And that's a component of EP. Unless I'm reading things wrong.
No, I think it's a way for us to do it.
But I don't think it becomes our only thing, right? And I think part of it is having the audacity to educate the commander on how to best employ us in accordance with our capabilities as well as our limitations.
That's what I would say is like, what
do we give up?
Because people are a resource.
Yeah.
People are a finite resource, and I can only turn them to so many tasks before they have to sleep. They have to do people things.
Which is why.
So if you focus them solely on that, are you doing the other aspect, or vice versa?
Exactly.
And I could see we have the resident expertise in that environment. So if not us, then who? And I don't have a good answer on that. We have the DCO companies, but
because it's hard. Because it's hard.
Yeah.
But I mean, in the words of a better Marine than I, it takes a Marine to measure up to that challenge. I wake up at night worrying about this.
Thinking about this?
Worrying about this. I don't know if that's healthy. In the aggregate, right? In the long run.
No, it's funny though, because this topic hasn't come up this week. In this regard.
So part of it is, to be fair, this isn't my show. I'm not a bystander. I'm an influencer.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, don't get me wrong, but I'm collecting and analyzing and assessing, sensing, deciding. I haven't acted yet because I'm trying to see where lie the heretics and the disciples. But if it's any indication, particularly from today, of who I walked into the room with, Master Gunnery Sergeant Andy Anderson, who's become a brother to me, even though I just met him, objectively.
I think it's good for him to be there.
Yes.
I think it's good because he's seeing. So I don't know what his role is up here.
He is the 0399 Master Gunnery Sergeant at Headquarters Marine Corps.
Okay.
The ops chief, for lack of a better term, of the Marine Corps, guiding the occupational field for the infantry.
So he's seeing behind the curtain into how we're making our sausage.
Yeah.
For lack of a better word.
Yeah.
And how what we're talking about directly impacts his Marines.
Yeah.
And why they gave up that structure to us.
Yeah.
And was it worthwhile?
Not once, but twice. Yeah.
Did they make the right decision?
Yeah. I didn't go the RT route. I didn't go the LAR route. I didn't go the MARSOC route. For my time in the Fleet Marine Force, from 03 to 08, and then 016 to 20, from 16 to 20, I fixated on the 03-11. And some of that was based upon potentially a myopic approach or perspective in terms of the 03-11 being the grunt's grunt and the center of what makes us as a institution or organization unique. And so as a result, I've always been tighter with them and more at home with them than even amongst fellow 2600s, not to mention 02s and 17s. On float, those were the guys that I...
Well, they were the base... for the entirety of the GWAT, that's the base unit of movement. Has been then.
Right. But even when I left the service to go do the schoolhouse, the embassy tour, the IC tour, that was still a vital component of how I saw things in terms of our value proposition as 2600s to the warfighter. To a certain extent, it has kept me grounded because as I tell the boys, like, the main thing is to keep the main thing the main thing. But, reading between the lines, particularly as it pertains to CPG and force design, they may not always be the main thing. We may be the main thing.
I mean, where's the money going? Where's the money going?
Right?
I think that speaks to where priorities are.
And the ability to sense the world around us.
And the emphasis that's being placed on that
becomes the primary function. And that's a challenging concept, and to some, a threat to our ethos. But it's a vital component to incorporating information as a warfighting function into how we shoot, move, and communicate. Particularly when we start to have to establish a prevailing narrative and generate a certain amount of resiliency in our efforts as we have to endure and persist in a manner that is essentially, for lack of a better term, a forlorn hope. I've like I said, I wake up at night thinking about this, and we were in the midst of an after action for a war game, Andy and I said something to the extent of, if we get this wrong, if we fail to validate our hypotheses appropriately, comprehensively, when Sergeant Castro shows up to that next conflict, he will not be set up for success, and it won't be Sergeant Sammy Castro. It'll be Sergeant Vicente Castro. And that keeps me up at night.
I can see that.
Going back to episode 1 with Sonny, he said, I got one left in me. I got one war left in me. I'd rather we do this now than leave this for my boy to fight.
Mm-hmm.
And, I can't argue that, because before I argue against it, I'd rather argue for it.
Absolutely. my daughter's still young, but I would rather during my time, right, than later on, where she has to live in it.
One of the things that worries me though is the aspect of retention. We talked about that a little bit today, and how we keep our best and our brightest engaged in this thing of ours. And we've actively and deliberately determined that we're not going to compensate the guys that are actually doing this in the same way that we're going to compensate and accelerate and promote and develop those that lead this in a manner that still adheres to almost a agricultural era
I don't know if
perspective.
I don't know if our retention model is right in that way. You just hit it. The agricultural era mindset.
Right.
Like I don't know if that's the right way. I don't know what the right way is, but I don't know if it's what we're I know it's not what we're doing.
Like I can objectively state that I am fairly compensated, but only because I'm not counting the monetary compensation. I'm counting those intangible things
Mm-hmm.
that the recruiter placed in front of me that aren't tangible,
Yeah.
for lack of a better term. It's the camaraderie. It's the challenge. It's the ability to have an impact and influence others. It's those things. It's not punching a clock, because there is no clock. It's nonstop.
The the Marines want to work. They they want to work and they want to know what they're doing matters. Um, so being out at first, that's what they want. They want to know what they're doing is important.
I don't.
And sometimes that's hard to tell the guy that, hey, you're going to the gym. We got to fap you to the gym.
Yeah, I don't. Man, especially in this in this era.
Mm-hmm.
Wait a minute, Master. I got a top secret clearance. You gonna send me to the gym?
You send me to the gym to pass out towels.
How do you square that?
I luckily don't. I'm not one of the company ops chiefs, so
How do your peers
I don't know.
square that? He looked at Marie in the eye. Who rogered up?
Growing up, we all joked like, "Oh yeah, I'll go to the gym. Send me to the gym." But now, I don't know.
Yeah.
I'll have to ask him tomorrow.
So I can see gate guard, right? Which is one of the things that we had to do in Okie. I don't know if I could fucking swing the gym with a straight face.
When I checked into the battalion, they had a Marine fap to the mechanized museum, and this still during COVID, and it was closed. But we still had to send him to a closed museum. That's the gym was still open. The museum that was closed, that's a rough one. And you're talking about, I think we had a linguist down there.
What language?
I would have to go back and
If you had to guess.
Probably Arabic.
We're better than this. I firmly believe we're better than this. What don't you want me to know about you?
Huh. That's an odd one.
What don't you want to admit with a microphone staring you in your face? You want another?
Yeah, I'll have one more.
This is a Balvenie 15.
Let me put it over here, not over the notebook.
Yeah. It might make the notebook a little bit better.
So I'll admit. So it's been 19 years in. I have not taken care of myself physically and probably mentally. Like I'm talking about, like I'm in pain, like the way I probably should have. And it's only now that I'm starting to admit these things.
So what are you doing to rectify that?
I go to physical therapy.
Good.
I have a mental health screening coming up that we'll see. I'm going to try and get into a TBI clinic. And it was my last deployment. It was with the IC, deployed with an actual like interagency deployment out to Afghanistan. And I was talking to a retired 0372 that I knew out there who was doing some contracting. And he was like, you go get screened for TBIs. He goes, like, yeah, I got blown up, almost blown up a second time. It's like, oh, they came back. He goes, no, like, go get screened. That you might have micro TBIs just from eating a bang too close in a shoot house. He goes, they're finding all new things now.
Yeah.
And you might not notice it, but it could be affecting you.
Yeah.
And like, I was like, yeah, I'm good. I was still like gunny. I was like, yep, I'm good. And keep deploying. I'm good. I don't need to do that. But now that my wife and I live on opposite coasts, she was my coping mechanism for a lot of things.
That's what I was going to ask you.
And now that we don't have that, we were each other's coping mechanism. That now I'm like, ooh, okay, we need to probably get evaluated for everything. Especially, looking at the back end of my career.
It all comes at a cost. And we don't necessarily understand the full extent of it in the moment.
I mean, medical's like, you have herniated discs. Like, how long's that been? I was like, decade.
What's a herniated disc?
It was like decades.
Yeah.
Like, you don't have much cartilage left in your knees. You have arthritis. I'm like, oh, okay, that explains that pain. Okay. But I didn't take care of those things when they happened because we couldn't let the mission fail.
Yeah. That's the toll, man.
So that's something I tell. So I don't have any more. I have the luxury that the other master sergeants in the battalion don't have, in that I don't have any Marine. I joke and say if one Marine and he's a chief warrant officer too, that's underneath me. But I don't have any Marines, so I get to talk to the Marines a lot more because I'm not in their chain of command. And due to the nature of where my office is, I interact with the VSOC Marines almost daily. And that's one thing I tell them. Take, if you're hurt, take care of yourself.
Take care of each other.
Yes.